need to go retweet some stuff.
Oh yeah, we should retweet if you want. If you want to see the
I just did a minute ago, the old one. I
yeah,
didn't know if you did a new one.
I haven't done a new one. I could do that really quick. But James, how you been? Where have you been?
Benjamin, I have been.
You
Did you
have,
say where have I been? Where haven't I been?
yeah, where have you been? And how have you
Well,
been?
this week,
Wherever you've been.
this past week, I'm home at the moment, but this past week I did a spin through the bustling metropolis of Bismarck, North Dakota,
Hmm.
immediately on the heels of going to a quaint little town called Los Angeles, California,
Wow.
which turns out was quite the, head spinning culture shock.
Yeah,
LA is very, it turns out, on the move, very crowded. Bismarck, it's very North Dakota. It's as North Dakota as a place could be.
which is more tyrannical,
Definitely Los Angeles.
really. Did you feel it? Did you feel it in the air? All the pretty women
No,
walking
not
around with their
really.
masks on.
I mean, there were some of that, like for real, but no, not really. I felt like I was in a hotel and I had an Uber and I had to walk down the street to the thing. And then I went to the airport. I went out to dinner. That was good.
Oh, what did you eat? I had steak there once. It was really good.
Oh, in this case, I had some mole negra, which is a Mexican food with the chicken. It was really
Oh,
good.
okay. Sounds kind of social justicey.
No,
Mole negra.
yeah, you're not supposed to translate it. That would be social justice.
No,
Black
yeah,
mole. Yeah,
black mole.
yeah. So, and then before that, I went to DC. DC is very swampy. Before that, I actually went on a vacation. Believe it or not, I went on a Caribbean cruise with the wife,
Did you
and
shuffleboard?
no,
Oh,
I did not shuffleboard. I saw an ice skating show on the boat. I didn't know that people did like Olympic grade ice skating on cruise ships, but apparently that's a thing. And then I was snorkeling, and then there was this barracuda, and I was like, I might die. It turns out, no, not unless there's a school. And then I was snorkeling again, and then there was a shark, and I was like, I'm going to die. And then turns out, no, it's a lemon shark. I was okay.
a lemon shark? Is that like a car, like a lemon car, just like a dysfunctional shark,
No, they're slightly yellow.
a retarded shark?
No, I didn't even go there.
Okay. Well, no, but
They're very
it's
sour
not.
sharks. Did you get the joke? Sour, lemon, sour, haha. Yeah.
That was the joke. Yeah, I went the other way. I
But
went
yeah, I
the
get around.
this
I
way.
get around.
You do. Did you learn anything about the seas when you were on your cruise?
Well, as it turns out, the ocean's very big, and you get a very real sense of how big the ocean is when for days and days and days you just watch nothing but ocean as far as you can see go by, and while the boat chugs along at a not terribly slow pace.
Yeah.
And then you realize when you look at the map that you're really on a very, very small part of the ocean, and it was as much ocean as you could possibly imagine for as long as it wanted to be. So you get a real sense of how big it is. Um, I
Yeah.
didn't really learn too much about the ocean. I learned that we were at this beach in St. Martin, and the waves were much taller than I was coming in, crashing on the beach. And I learned that that's pretty fun, but also that you will come away with injuries in that surf.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it slams when me and the family went to Hawaii and we
Oh,
checked
yeah.
out different beaches and there's like these slams that will just completely humble you
Yeah.
in
Well, we called
relation
it
to the ocean. Yeah.
the beach, and then there was what we called the danger zone. And then there was the fun zone, which is just on the other side of the danger zone. And then further out, you just kind of go
Yep.
up and down in the water, and that's
Yeah.
the safe zone, except for whatever's swimming under you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Lemon sharks, barracuda schools.
Well, that was two different islands, but yeah, I assume.
Did you were you able like to unplug yourself from this world that you're in and then plug it back in, or were you still chugging along with your
I mean, I poked
internet
around on the
brain?
social media in my downtime. The boat had Wi-Fi, so like that was okay. But for the most part, I wasn't really engaged. So yeah, I kind of unplugged for most of a
Yeah.
week. Um,
Yeah.
I got out my laptop to work on some writing on the boat one day, looking out at the ocean, and
Huh.
I made it for about 20 minutes. I wrote like 3 paragraphs, and I was like, "This
Oh,
is
great.
no, just put it back." And
Wonderful.
so
Oh,
a
good.
little
Okay.
unplugging.
Yeah, I can sense that your aura has this
Sunburn?
peaceful.
Oh.
Not no, actually.
No, not anymore. I was vibrantly pink. I am not striped with radiation any longer.
Huh. Well,
The
while you
sun
were
down there in the
gone,
tropics just
what?
hits different.
Yeah, it does. It does. We just got back from Texas. I kind of want to move there.
Well,
Really
Texas
nice.
is pretty cool, actually.
San Antonio.
They have
Leslie's
good
like,
salsa.
you have nothing. You know nothing. Benjamin Snow or Benjamin Rain. Like it's just because it was really mild. It was like 90, 80, cloudy. But she's like, summer comes and you're
Yeah,
toast.
you need to go back in July before you commit to anything. It's a different
Yeah.
ride. Go to Houston in July. It's good for you. Very
Apparently,
good for your
there's
skin.
apparently people don't like Houston all that much. People are like,
No,
"Ew,
you should
Houston."
go there. You'll see.
Okay, firsthand. I know one
It's a
person from
sweaty
Houston.
proposition for a long time of the year.
No, I see on your little tiny map if people can focus on it. Like there's this one like node, and I think that's Houston. Like you've
It is
gone through
Houston. There's
Houston.
a
You
hub
go,
airport there.
yeah, you
I
go
go
through there
through
quite a bit.
Houston a lot. At one point, I forget if it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year, but I might be wrong. In March, I was in the Houston airport like 11 or 12 times. Like I went there a lot.
The Chick-fil-A people like know you by name.
No, it turns out that they see a lot of people, and I stopped eating Chick-fil-A now with my, good diet and
Yeah,
health.
you're
So
trimming
now I
down.
have to go hunt down a steak, which in the airport costs like $40,
Yeah,
$50, $60.
yeah,
It's insane.
yeah.
Or I use this other technique called fasting, where I just don't eat in airports. It's really good.
Oh, it's airport fasting. It's kind of like intermittent fasting, but like layover fasting.
But I just had this layover in Denver on my way back from North Dakota, and they have a restaurant in the Denver airport that I almost never have time to go to called Root Down, and Root Down is on another level of good, and people should go there.
Okay.
Um, that's my plug for something today.
Root
I sat
down.
next to a communist. It was fun.
Oh, did you engage with the communism?
Well, I did a little bit, but in a very subterfuge way. Because he said, what do you do? We got chatting or whatever. And he's like, well, what do you do? Because we were talking about the food at first. And then what do you do? And I'm like, well, I travel a lot and all this. And so it's telling him about this. And then he's like, well, what do you research? And I was like, communism. And he's like, oh, cool. I'm a communist. And that's as far as I got. And so I was just like, oh, let's just spy on this guy. Let's just
Oh,
ask
okay.
him. Let's just talk to him. And so we get talking, and he's like trying to explain to me why communism never works. And it's because they always set up a dictatorship. And it's because the people that like start to organize it are never that serious. They don't really get it. So it always gets taken over by people who want to have all the power. And so, he's like, I don't know if I can really call myself a communist because I'm really more of a socialist. And then he starts like getting into all these like stupid weeds, and I get answering things and saying things back. And he's like, wow, I think you might know Marxism even better than I do. And I was like, well, I mean, I do speak about it all over the world.
Mm.
And he was just very excited about all this. And then he ordered a beer to go, and he said, I'll have another one of these to go. And the waitress said, which one was it? And he said, whichever one is the cheapest on the menu. And I was thinking, of course. And so he got his beer and he left. And then some very, very nice, very patriotic older couple sat down where he left, and I talked to them, and we had a very similar conversation, except that their view is extraordinarily the opposite. And so it was a fun little hour and a half to kill
Oh,
at the
wow.
airport.
What is the opposite of communism?
Happiness, success, thriving. I don't know. I mean, there's so many answers to that question. Communism is Christianity turned inside out. But
Mm.
I mean, literally, I did this whole thing
Upside
on that
down.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
well,
was looking
upside
through that.
down, so inverted, inside out. It's kind of both. It's like you take exactly the Christian motifs and you reverse them, you turn them inside out, and
Hmm.
down to like the idea that, for example, in Christianity, salvation is purely an individual proposition, right? So Jesus came and he died for our sins, and then you can choose as an individual to accept this and approach a state of grace or not. It is wholly individual. You could join the best church in the world. They could do everything right all the time. They could have pitch perfect sermons, nail the gospel to the wall just as perfectly as it could be done. They could have the most, faith without works is dead. So they could have the most active, perfect ministry out in the world, and you're and you're sitting in the back and you're like, yeah, but I don't know for myself. And guess what? You didn't get in. The church can't get you in. Sorry, Catholics. I know you have a slightly different interpretation. It's not a corporate endeavor. It is an individual endeavor as to whether or not you accept grace. Now, this isn't how communism works at all. For communism, we say, oh, well, it's a religion like with no repentance, no forgiveness. That's not true. They have repentance. You're supposed to repent of your desire to have private property and identify as an individual, because we're supposed to be a collective. But the problem is that it only works when everybody else does it too. So you're constantly mad at the rest of the class who's not doing their homework. Mm-hmm. It's like communism is a gigantic second grade group project where the whole grade is, it is. The logic is that when everybody, it's like when, you know, I think we've talked about this kid that was in my first grade class, Timmy Linkenfelter, who was probably, you know, ADHD before such a diagnosis existed at all. So he just got like beat every day at school by it was back in the paddling days. You could paddle him. Oh, I don't even know if you could legally paddle, but they did it anyway, because welcome to the South. And anyway, Timmy, we very frequently had corporate punishment of the entire class. The whole class was going to hell because Timmy wasn't on board, right? Well, communism kind of like that. The whole of humanity either saves itself by getting on board with communism and building the kingdom of God, which is the society organized around communist ideals, or there's selfish people who aren't, as many as even one, that prevent it from manifesting, at which point you don't get to go to heaven. So you now have to, it's now collective salvation that depends on what other people do, not what you do. And so that's probably part of why they're so pissed off at everybody else all the time. And then, of course, we could talk about the virtues get turned into, the virtues and the vices get inverted. You know, they seem to be a little bit envious. Sloth seems to be kind of the thing. Look at these poor kids at Columbia. They're so hungry. They need humanitarian aid.
What is going on with that? Is it like, why? Like, there was this, I got my lucky viral tweet in of the month where I took a screenshot from this girl who's demanding like a sippy cup, you know, like they lock themselves in the room. They're going to hold their breath until they die. They need humanitarian aid. And right behind her is like a Jamil looking motherfucker, pardon my French, from the Evergreen, like this guy with the crop top, you know, it's like fake and gay. Here we go.
Fake and gay. There they are. We know the R is somewhere around the corner.
And they got their, I don't know this pattern. It's the Palestinian liberation pattern, you know, like their
it's called like a kafia or something like that. Yeah, it's their handkerchief that they use to hide their faces so they can get away with illegal activity in public. Yeah.
Yeah. But how does that have to do at all with the regime that like Islam is? I mean, if you want to go, if you think of it that way, how are the people who the infidada people will throw off the roofs first? Is that actual tinfoil or is that like some polyurethane blend?
No, it's just a hat, but it says tinfoil, so I had to get ready for my answer.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so the people who are going to be thrown off the roofs are championing the people who will throw them off the roofs, but they are somehow in denial of that. They have to know about gay rights in Islamic countries or whatever. You know, they have to know that women will be subjected. Okay.
No, you say they have to know these things, right? But they also think food comes from the grocery store. So, and they also think that not having a meal plan requires humanitarian aid to their endeavor when like literally there's like a KFC across the street. Like all they have to do is stop holing themselves up in their encampment, or maybe they could have bought some stuff in advance, or maybe they could hire somebody to bring it to them. We all know they have lots of money. They're very wealthy for the most part. So
they're not real communists.
It's not clear what they know, is my point.
But are they at all tied to actual communism at all? Or is this just some sort of LARPing?
Well, Benjamin, they said so. So we have to assume that at least some proportion, in fact, we don't have to assume. We have to recognize. It's not even assuming. We have people at these encampments with microphones standing up saying, now is time to operate your Marxist values. Now is time to put your Marxist activity into practice. We know that, entities that are Marxist, like this, Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, are all in on supporting this. You look at all of the different Marxist outfits on, the Democratic Socialists. You look at, it doesn't matter, all over the social media, they're all calling it not just the Intifada, which means shaking off in Arabic or whatever, and so they're going to shake off the Jews out of the Middle East. But they're calling it the socialist Intifada. You're going to shake off capitalist society. You're going to shake off bourgeois values. You're going to shake off white supremacy. All the things that they have in all their various little branches of neo-Marxism. So Marxism's definitely present.
Yeah.
How the real question is Marxism there? Because we know from David Horowitz, who was a member originally of the Students for Democratic Society, which is also, by the way, where the Weather Underground came from. That was an offshoot of SDS.
It's interesting
David
how
Horowitz,
all these things connect, all these
isn't it?
revolutionaries.
Yeah, David Horowitz defected, and he gave one of my mantras. I got it from him. I didn't make it up, which is the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. And so these little shits on campus don't care what they're protesting as long as they get to protest something. And the question is, what are they attempting to achieve with their Marxist agitation? Because they don't have a very sympathetic, like with George Floyd, at least you had this idea, like there's this poor black guy that got rolled by life, rolled by society, probably subject to racism. Then he gets killed by the cops, which turns out not to be exactly what happened. But you get this sympathetic character, right? And with the drag queen stuff and all that last year and the year before, drag queens aren't exactly sympathetic characters at all. But those poor gay kids that just don't have anybody that they can connect with or look up to, that's a sympathetic character at the heart of this. There's no sympathetic character here. Hamas is fucking terrorists. Like, their charter says that they're going to destroy all the Jews, like kill all the Jews. Like, this isn't like a sympathetic entity. They just committed for whatever led to it, they committed a gigantic, horrific crime on October 7th, and that's the spark for this thing. This is not a, reservoir of sympathy. Plus, people are just kind of sick of these kids. Like, really? The students are demonstrating again? Huh. Really? They're blocking off buildings. They're blocking traffic. They're blocking somebody's happiness. They're blocking Jews. They're doing something horrible. They're breaking windows. They're setting fire to crap again. Oh, wow. Tents. Who's happy about tents now? San Francisco, Los Angeles, Austin, Portland, Seattle, Tacoma, you name the city.
We demand tents.
Nobody likes tents all over the place anymore. Urban camping, we might call it, has worn itself a little bit thin. And so they don't have a reservoir of sympathy anymore. So the question is what they're trying to achieve. It's not a question as to whether or not this is youth Marxist activity or Red Guard activity. Okay. But I'm going to throw a term on the table. We can come back to it because you have a question.
This is assuming that they do want to achieve something.
They do want to achieve something.
Okay, it's not just the theme card. Theme park,
and so do the people paying for it. The people who bought all the identical tents at 10 different campuses or whatever. Whoever is paying for that, and I just saw something go out. It went out last night. It went viral. I was working, so I kind of retweeted it and moved on. So I don't remember who it was. I think DC Drano tweeted it. I don't remember for certain, even if that's right, but I think that's right. And it was like, oh yeah, we found out who's paying for it. It's like, what a surprise! It's being paid for. They're trying to achieve something. The question, though, that I started to ask was, it's not, is there Marxism that's the relevant question present? The question, is there real sentiment for anything Islamic? Is that actually there or not? And honestly, I suspect the answer is yes, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. If you were to ask me what the preponderance of the people showing up have Marxist values versus Islamic values, I would tell you that it's probably at least 90%, probably greater than 95% lean toward having communist values versus Islamic values. But of course, there's the kind of more complicated piece that the Marxist identity politics, the decolonial theory that fomented from Palestinian Americans, particularly Edward Said, is designed specifically to see not just Muslims in general, but specifically Palestinian Muslims, as they're called, as an oppressed minority that therefore has to be valorized under the identity politics rubric of this Western Marxist movement. So there's this crossover tied up in there that, as you were kind of saying, don't they realize they'll get thrown off of roofs? I don't know if they do. They think that they're championing for some minority that's probably going to think that they're saviors and think they're great. Turns out that's not how history treats these people. But like I said, there's something else happening on a bigger picture, on a bigger scale, where the money comes from. And this is called the Red-Green Alliance. And the Red-Green Alliance is something a lot of people don't know about.
Ooh. Is this a tinfoily thing? Or are you going to take it off now?
No, it's not a tinfoily thing. Actually, I'm hot.
I love the hat.
So I might put it on later if we get scandalous. Okay. So It turns out it's in the 80s today, and I'm not quite. I was sitting out in the sun before I got on the live stream. I'm still a little bit warm. I don't want to get all shiny. So at any rate, Red Green Alliance is an alliance between Marxists and Islamic militants. What are they allied to do? Take down the West. What is that in Marxist and cultural Marxist language? It is called counter-hegemony. They are an outside cultural influence that is hostile, that is going to come in and try to subvert or destroy the Western hegemony. So they're in alliance. They, the Iranian Muslims, for example, have been not too shy for a long time at calling the United States the Great Satan. This is kind of a big thing. They're not big fans. They kind of want to take the place down. They see this across Western values overall, and they want to take it down. Who else wants to take it down? Freaking communists. And so they've teamed up. Well, we can work together, and then we'll figure out the spoils later. And if I were going to go out and venture, both of them think that they're the one who's going to use the other and to advance their interests and then control the other. If I were to put down a bet on which side is likely to win, at least in any local skirmish, the Muslims are going to roll the communists. In fact, they're probably going to crush them, convert or die, should they get what they think they want out of this.
Yeah.
Their long-term strategy behind the Red-Green Alliance is that communism will come in. So what does it do? Communism in general, it'll infiltrate, it agitates, it desecrates, and it confiscates. So it's going to come in, it's going to infiltrate and agitate Western civilization, Western religion. It's going to desecrate Western moral values and Western spirituality. And the Muslims think that they're going to withstand the tide because, in their own phrasing, which I just heard the other day, that we're not a cucked religion that gives in. So they're going to withstand the tide, and they're going to have a bastion of incorruptible spirituality that will then mop up Western converts. That's pretty much what they suspect. The communists, on the other hand, think that they're going to be able to win by virtue of the fact that they're the most ruthless and scientific people on the planet. And the problem for the Islamic side of this equation actually is that the global tide is not with them. The global tide is not. How are the Uyghurs doing over there in China, right? And there's a reason, because the CCP is not real fond of all of this. And the Russians, to the degree that they're allied with this, we know they are because of BRICS, probably not going to be real fond of all this, right? So I think that in a local skirmish, what you're going to see is the Muslims beat the communists, if there's that. So watch out, Europe and Canada. But in the longer run, that the communists are going to roll all of it. And there'll probably be something really ugly when that conflict comes down. But anyway, at the moment, we have what's called the Red-Green Alliance. It is sometimes symbolized by a watermelon, which is also supposed to represent Palestine because it's green on the outside and red on the inside, Islamic on the outside, but communist on its core.
Okay.
The Palestinian flag is red and green and white and black.
Okay,
and then there's that white part of the rind and the black seeds. This is the whole thing. You'll see actually that a lot of these little shits have watermelons all over themselves, like tattoos, or all over their tents that somebody bought for them at Walmart. Yeah.
Well, the crossover to the BLM 2020 tide with the watermelon symbol is kind of unfortunate, but I haven't seen inner fighting over that. I wonder.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that to them. That's its own intersectional battle to be waged. But as we see with kind of the rise of what they're calling migrants or undocumented Americans, which everybody up until 25 minutes ago called criminal aliens or illegal aliens, what we're seeing with that is that the African American populations or black populations in the United States are not particularly important to this phase of the revolution. You remember when we talked before that Hegel said history uses people then discards them? Well, they were useful for BLM in 2020. Now they're being discarded in favor of the new proletariat, which is this undocumented American, so-called migrant, so-called criminal alien thing. And they feel it, they know it, they see it, and they're pissed off. So it's just like how the feminists got used to advance whatever, and then the creepy queer theorists took over, and now we've got trans and women's rights are literally by the White House right out the window. Because history used that movement and discarded it as well. You played your role. We got that meme. You've seen the meme where it shows the spiral, the dialectical spiral, and it shows some activist and it says, why won't the revolution stop here? And it shows just some part of it circled or whatever. Yeah, that's what's happening. So
But
onward and upward.
the masters of the universe, the powers that be, the moneyed, the entrenched, it seems like they're not really concerned with this low grade revolution, these student protests and stuff. So they, you hear, oh, look, it's election season, another protest season coming on. Like the Democrats want this, but it doesn't seem like this is going to work in the Democrats' favor, or maybe it is, maybe not. What are your thoughts about like this kind of leading up to some sort of swing toward, not getting Trump back in? It seems
Well, this
like
is
BLM
complicated.
worked in favor of the Democratic power structure in 2020. It doesn't seem like this watermelon. Revolution is working in favor of the Democrats this term.
No, I don't think it is actually. I mean, so the White House announced either today or yesterday that they're going to try to bring Palestinian refugees over and give them rapid amnesty, American citizenship. So maybe those are new voters. I don't know. And maybe
Yeah.
that's in response to some of this. But what I'm seeing is that I think that this uprising, maybe I'm missing some of the strategy, and maybe I'm missing what it's that there's something else it's preparing for, which is kind of my
Yeah.
biggest suspicion that comes later. But this part particularly is not working out for the Democrats. And so what I'm seeing is, looking back at the Chinese Cultural Revolution, is I'm seeing a consolidation of power. Remember the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, not Mao's original takeover in 1949, was a war against the existing CCP, which wasn't doing what the very radical students wanted, which was putting Mao back into power. So this is like that. Here we have these student uprisings. We know that they're fomented. We know that it's not all students and it's not all faculty. When we look at the arrest reports, say at Washington University, they were very forthcoming about this. The majority of the arrests were of people who were neither student nor faculty. So there were outside agitators who came in. Probably they're paid to do that, or at least some of them, maybe many of them. We know that there's these tents and so on. Something's being paid for. So there's probably a strategy behind it. But like I said before, they don't have a sympathetic, their movement's not sympathetic at all. Nobody's happy about this, or very few people. So what they're trying to probably do, if you had to ask me, in addition to kind of more immediate purposes, but kind of a big picture strategy, is that they're trying to pressure the Democrats to be more radical, to make more radical concessions, to go even further and faster, to accelerate the transformation of society. If I had to guess. That puts, as people are noticing, the universities themselves, university administrations and presidents, but also the Democratic Party, at something of a pinch, right? You've got Elon Omar, you've got AOC, you've got the Squad coming out, and Jamal Bowman, who's an honorary Squad girl, coming out and definitely promoting and supporting all of this. So the more radical wing of the Democrats are all behind it. The Democrats are therefore likely being put through a Maoist power consolidation toward the radicals process. And I don't know how it's going to shake out, because it may not be very opportune for them. That said, our mutual friend, Wokel Distance, Mike, put out a really, really excellent thread the other day about the fact of the matter is that these kind of events are very rarely about the contents, and not just the issue is never the issue is always revolution. And I said that what we're seeing at these uprisings is leftist church, but I want you to think of church as a place where community organizing and leadership training happens. And that's what Mike's thread was about. And I think he's spot on, is that what they're doing is recruiting and identifying potential future leaders for the next phase that'll come over the summer and into the fall. They need to find out which young people are going to take initiative, which ones are going to get up with the microphone, which ones are going to be closer to pitch perfect, which ones are going to fold or crack or whatever. And they need to winnow out the wheat from the chaff. They need to take the kids that are showing leadership and commitment and start to groom them into the next leadership roles within the next phase, whatever particular issue that it takes. And that issue, I'm almost positive, is going to be immigration. And so think of this like training camp. Yeah. And everybody's rolling their eyes. Oh, it's campuses. Oh, this and that. And I have a feeling that what this is, as Mike put it, so this is his identification, not my brilliance. In this case, it is leadership training and leader identification camp for radical leftists. It's to figure out who are the people who are going to take the risks, who are the people who are going to motivate a crowd, and to identify those people and start getting them further training. And maybe they think that, society is basically written off the universities. Maybe they think that they can get some further concessions. Maybe they think they can get some choice footage of police beating up students. But my suspicion is that their primary purpose is to identify and train the band of radicals who will lead the phase that's needed this late summer and fall.
Mm-hmm. But it seems like the Democratic establishment and their Republican lackeys lack charisma, energy. They have a lot of momentum on their side. I just don't know if like this radical contingent of the left actually does have anything other than nominal power within the actual establishment.
It's hard to say. I mean, so far we've watched an awful lot of concessions given by the Biden administration in their direction. I mean, obviously this Title IX thing that they just came out with is in the general direction. We've seen a lot of very vigorous pushes at the transgender stuff. We've seen a lot of very vigorous support for the entire queer theory apparatus and the queer education in schools. We've seen, relentless support for whatever Black Lives Matter style initiative still is trying to hang on. But like I said, their energy is dumping primarily into the reservoir of immigrants, whether it's that they think they're going to flip them into voters legally or illegally before November, whether it's that they want to import a proletariat so we can have an actual class warfare. So China did its proletarian revolution and then it did a cultural revolution 15 years later. We've been doing a cultural revolution for 4. Now maybe we need to have the proletarian violent revolution phase. But for whatever reason, the Democrats are all behind this immigration thing. This allows the narrative to be seeded, and I mean seed like plant a seed, not like given up, seeded that there's something to this kind of post-colonial analysis. And then they can come back and say, wait, maybe what happened in April going into May was too radical. Maybe that's not what we really wanted to do, but let's talk about something that's way more sane that all Americans can agree on. Let's talk about solving the immigration crisis by offering pathways to citizenship and amnesty and getting these people, incorporated into full American society. These are already Americans. They're just undocumented Americans. And of course, the critical immigration theory narrative is going to be that's one kind of American citizen is another kind of American, and only bigotry stops you from agreeing that we're all Americans together, and so that everybody deserves the full benefits of American citizenship under that misunderstanding.
No human is illegal. To say if all human beings are equal, if equality is the law, inclusion is the law, diversity is our strength, then America needs to accept as many people as possible.
Right. And they go straight at the Christian values too. That kid on the other side of the razor wire is your neighbor. I remember them like 2 months ago. That was like the narrative they were driving. And all these bigwigs, not in the progressive wings of the like weird church, but like the kind of like fake conservative wings of the church were pushing, oh yeah, those are our neighbors too. We have to reach out to them in Christ-like love, blah, blah, blah. And it's like breaking the law. It's straight up, they're breaking the law. And it's a deliberate attack on our country, and they're manipulating our values to get you to accept it. And they went Christian values first, and most particularly, which I think is extremely telling and very important to recognize.
Yeah. Are American values strong enough at this point in time to resist such a dissolution, just a washing away of the bonds and just the replacing of?
Well, that's a good question. And that is the question of this entire revolution. And it's the question we've been revolving around for our years of conversation. My answer is that what I see is an American values revival. I see people hearkening back to the flag. I hear people, I'm one of them, that I can't hear the national anthem without starting to tear up now. Before it was just like, oh yeah, national anthem. It's like, cool. Yeah. Now it's like, it really means something. We see the picture of those fraternity guys that are rallied around the flag where they've put the American flag back up, where these little punks put up the so-called Palestinian flag. And like, they're in their backpacks and got their earbuds and everything else. They're such college kids.
Yesteryear's frat bros too, on top of it,
Yeah, but it's 100% the kind of image that can survive, that can ignite, a revival of American values, and that can survive as one of the historical images that, pointed to the changing of the tides. It's just really the colors, the imagery, the iconic kids with their phone and rallying around the American flag, being based as can be. So I think that this revival of American values is big, and I think it's real. As you know, we talked about it already. I travel a lot. I see it in
Yeah.
Literally, I've
Yeah.
been to 44
Yeah.
states, so I've seen it in 44 states. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of hopeful about American values being not just strong enough, but awakening back in time. A, two things: A, to repel the invasion, and B, to repel the temptation into very radical, reactions that I think take us in the wrong direction.
That is the question, because you're. Well, I see you get in the crosshairs of people who would be on your side, patriotically speaking, when they start to, like, with that, whatever Abbott, the Texas governor, was doing and Biden's doing. They had the kind of, it was almost kayfabe. It didn't even really amount to anything, but a bunch of states signed a petition. We're going to defy the federal government and we're going to stand our ground here. I mean, that would be like a natural reaction of patriotism, to reinforce these boundaries and to stand up to the people who are eroding them, ignoring them, and then shipping people all across America.
Yeah.
So how does this reaction happen and not overreact? And where do you stand on that? Because some people say, well, you're just controlled opposition. James Lindsay wants to come into Christian churches. He wants to come into American, these conservative places. And then he wants to preach to us about all these values that we hold. And then when we're going to finally act, he's going to tell us to slow down, and he's going to hamper our fervor. So
Yeah, Braveheart was controlled opposition when William Wallace and Braveheart, when he was screaming "hold, hold, hold, hold," and so the army didn't go running off at the wrong moment and do a Leroy Jenkins. Yeah, that's controlled opposition. And if I'm controlled opposition, message to my controllers: send the checks. I've never received a single one. Like, who's controlling me? Send money. I have no
Phil.
idea who these people are allegedly that are controlling me. I don't obviously I don't even
that
like
criticism
So,
aside, I like
yeah.
there's
I
that
know.
criticism, but the heart behind it is, like, how do you direct this fervor, this patriotic fervor that you yourself are inciting? You're exciting this, this reaction by preaching what you preach.
This is like the Harry Potter problem, right? So what do I mean by that? It's classic good guy, bad guy, Jedi, Sith, whatever motif of good and evil that you want. It's Boromir. Do you take the ring to fight back in Minas Tirith, or do you send it with the stupid halfling wandering witless through the volcano-ridden plains of Mordor? It's the same motif that's in so many of these stories over and over and over again. I call it the Harry Potter problem because that was the first one that popped to mind. That's where you think in the fifth book, the really dark one where Harry's a pissed off teenager, Voldemort's all in his head all the time, screwing with him, and they go to the Ministry of Magic and he gets tricked and they get the prophecy and it breaks and the whole thing. And whoops, spoiler alert. And then Harry's chasing Bellatrix, the evil witch, out, and he tries to do the evil Cruciatus curse, the forbidden Cruciatus curse, the pain curse on her. And she laughs at him and says, you have to really mean it. You don't have the heart for it, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, though, is what you have, and you learn this in, I guess, the previous of the novels, is you have these unforgivable curses. In other words, you have these high-powered magics that the good guys aren't allowed to use. They're not allowed to pick up the ring and go to Minas Tirith. They have to do something different. And so why am I bringing that up? That's crazy. Well, this is why. It's really simple. And it's nothing more or less than this. If we're going to preserve our constitutional republic, we have to fight to the fullest extent that we can within the boundaries of the Constitution. In other words, that energy has to turn into not just constitutionally protected things, because we know that we look at January 6th, we know that they're setting us up. We know that they're trampling our rights. We know that they're using all kinds of legal pretext and legal theories to ruin people's lives over non-crime. We know that this is happening. We know they have the power to do this. We have to be dumping our resources into legal activity. And I mean legalistic activity. I mean lawyers. I mean that we need to be showing up to democratic entities, or like school board meetings, where the population, when I say democratic, what I mean, the population gets to come and have a voice. And we need to be putting that information out and fighting a long war with this. Because if we take rash action, if we create circumstances that they can exploit, infiltrate, run a false flag on, or anything like that, we know that they're going to do it because they've done it. And so you can say, well, it's First Amendment constitutionally protected activity to gather peaceably. Well, it sure is. But Ray Epps is going to be there, or Nick Fuentes is going to be there screaming, it's time to go into the Capitol. And it's funny how neither one of them got arrested for that. It's funny how we have like everyday people, we have actors who wandered in to the Capitol, hours afterwards, got told you can't be here. Some stuff happened, turned around and left, and get arrested by the FBI weeks later. This is like Siaka, who was in Lady Ballers. This happened to him. We have these stories. We have people who wandered into the Capitol. We have people being investigated for being near the Capitol without even going in on January 6th. We have all of this happening, but then we have people like Ray Epps saying, it's time to go into the Capitol. And you got people like Nick Fuentes saying, it's time to go into the Capitol. And like nothing's happening to them. We know that there are people taking advantage of these situations to create an image of something happening, an insurrection in this case, that isn't what's happening, and that we will then be prosecuted according to the image. Just like Derek Chauvin got prosecuted according to an image and is in prison for it. And we have to play according to you can say it's our constitutional right, and if we don't exercise it, we lose it. That's kind of true, but nobody's telling you stop protesting for the rest of your life. Nobody's recommending it. In fact, the idea is we have to create the space to where we have the capacity to do that. And this kind of a political warfare. We already talked about the magic of the whole game. Yeah. The magic is whether or not the character taking part is considered sympathetic or not sympathetic in the court of public opinion with a mass media and political apparatus that sometimes we call the vertically integrated messaging apparatus or propaganda machine, fully armed even against them. If you can't come off, if you end up looking like potentially violent hillbillies, or if one redneck shows up and does something stupid, or one Fed pretending to be a redneck shows up and does something stupid, all of you lose all of the public sympathy. They'll use that as a pretext to solve the problem that the government wants to solve, which is that there's any resistance whatsoever. So unfortunately, we have to play smarter. Our game has to be not showing up in large numbers. It has to be exposing the manipulations. It has to be exposing the propaganda. It has to be exposing what they want to do with that to take our liberties away from us. It has to be getting involved legally, doing the hard, nasty work of getting involved in local and state politics. And fighting it one day at a time that way. It's not satisfying. And what I said at the time back in, what was that, January, I guess, it's not cathartic. We're looking, a lot of people are dying for catharsis. They want to have that emotional release of finally something's happening. That's happening right now. I just saw it. Finally the police come out. There's these student uprisings on campus. And then like in Texas, everybody's like, Texas is doing it right. I got involved. It's like, the cops are busting their asses, and it's like you want to see the kid get picked up and thrown by the cops or something crazy like that. You have this drive inside of you, this need for like, finally, we're going to stand up to these people. And that's a moment of catharsis. But that moment of catharsis can be hijacked. That is not to sound both Christian and philosophical at the same time, that is not a logos-driven, or to sound like Mike Young, wokel. It is not a logos-driven response. That is not a logical response. It is not a structured and orderly response. That's a pathos-driven response. Now, I didn't know this until yesterday when, thanks to one Tucker Carlson, we're now all talking about Alexander Dugin again. And I stumble across, I don't know if you know that Stephen Hicks, he's a philosopher, a friend of mine. Stephen Hicks is probably one of the best read people in the West on Dugin. And so he has like all these videos out there about Dugin. And I'm like, son of a bitch, I'm going to have to waste my time learning about Dugin. So I went on my walk and I put on one of Stephen Hicks's videos that came up on my feed, like 40 minutes introduction to his, one of Dugin's essays about fascism. And I'm listening to this for like 40 minutes while I go on a walk out in the evening sunshine. And Dugin was really, really clear, actually, that he says it explicitly, that fascism is not based in the logos. It's based in pathos. It's based in that emotion. It is a cathartic reaction to the oppression of communism coming to your place and then pouring out with a kind of vibrant energy. And he's very positive about this. He calls it like red fascism or something. It's fascism red and borderless, if I remember the title right. Or maybe it's borderless and red, something like that. So it's supposed to be like, it's international fascism, global fascism, and it's still very communist in its orientation. If it's red, I guess, I don't know. But I listened to this whole breakdown by Stephen Hicks, and what really stuck out to me is that this fascist reaction is a reaction of pathos. It's a reaction that taps into that drive for catharsis against these people who are causing you perpetual problems. And man, do you hanker for it? Man, do you ache for it? Man, do you want to see it? Man, does it feel good when you watch a cop body one of these people too? And then what happens? The next thing you know, there's a whole movement against the police. Every libertarian jumps in with both feet, and the whole thing turns into a big mess. And usually some leftist agenda happens, and all of a sudden this poor kid that got bodied by a fully grown adult cop, and I say kid, the kid's probably 22, so he's not really a kid. But you have this very young person on a college campus looking like an nincompoop, doesn't know how to get his own food, apparently, has to call, a cafeteria plan humanitarian aid, gets bodied by a cop, and all of a sudden you have your sympathetic character. It's not about freaking Hamas anymore. It's not about this whole like terrorist Palestine. Now it's about young people getting beat up by cops. And so the question is, we don't know how that's going to play out this time. There's a lot of catharsis, and I don't see it working out on the other side, because what I said was this whole long digression was the magic is in who is the sympathetic character. So you don't get to have protests, mass protest conservatives, until you get to be a sympathetic character in the eyes of the public. It doesn't work. It will not work for you. You are going to be set up, and the setup is going to work every time until it turns out that stuff has shifted far enough to where you're a sympathetic character, or that you're holding up a cause that the public is broadly behind.
Yeah. Could it be the case that enough people, like with the cancellation culture, enough people get canceled that it wears down that the sting of being canceled, being called a bigot, being called a racist? These people are sacrificed on the altar of progressive politics. Brett Weinstein, just in the knitting community and in any given community over the course of 2016 or 2014 to 2020, gaming, blah, blah, blah. Enough people experiencing cancellation just say, okay, well, I'm not going to apologize anymore. And then cancellation happens again, and more people are like, no, you can't just cancel somebody like that. In the same way, enough cringy college kids fucking around and finding out, and people are like, actually, no, you deserve that. Now grow up and move on.
Yeah, I think that we're discovering that moment has arrived. And the question is, how do we make sure that this is done swiftly, minimally, and legally so that it doesn't flip anything back the other way, kind of from a strategic perspective, but also so that we don't lose our heads? It's very easy to get caught up in that moment. I tell this story a lot. Once upon a time, I was at a Christmas party, and I was sitting there, and I was drinking a beer. I think I was drinking a root beer, actually. Ooh. And some guy came up behind me, put me in a chokehold. And it turns out,
Alex Jones?
I knew everybody in that room was a friend, right? I knew I wasn't getting really attacked. And I immediately I stayed calm. I reminded myself of this. I was like, okay, everybody here's a friend. Don't kill whoever it is. And so then I kind of, set my beer down. I grabbed his arm and put some weight on it, like they teach in the jujitsu class, so that I could swallow my freaking mouthful of root beer. And I edged out of my seat, made sure there was no pressure with this stupid rear naked choke around my neck, no pressure on my windpipe, not really successfully squeezing my carotid arteries. And then I beat his ass. I took this guy, I turned it around, I flipped him over my hip. His feet almost hit the ceiling, threw him on the ground. And I reached down, put his arm in an arm bar, put a knee on his chest and like his rib cage, and slapped him in the side of the face. And I was like, you lose. And then I helped him up, and I had to get taken outside at that point, not because like things got crazy, not because it like continued, because all I wanted to do was find somebody else to fight. Something woke up. Some pathological energy of we're fighting now, and who's the next? Who wants some? Woke up. And so I went outside. It was Christmas. It was cold as shit outside. Walked around the block, chilled out, came back in. Everything was fine the rest of the night. Got talking to the guy. He was like, well, I always knew you'd train martial arts. I just wanted to see what would happen if somebody like grabbed you. And it's like, well, that wasn't really a great decision. And so anyway, what I'm saying is that once you get caught up in that moment where stuff starts to move the other direction, it's very easy to get caught up in that passion. And again, we're in the same exact root words: passion, pathos.
Yeah,
We're in the exact same
I know.
emotive reaction that's no longer logical, no longer
Yeah.
sensible, and that threatens the republic. And it's extremely important for us to remember that we can lose the republic by going off the cliff the left wants to drive us off, or we can lose the republic by oversteering and going into the ditch on the other side of the road.
Okay.
Um,
But
so
where's could we look at historically when America has lost its shit? Like when such a reaction has gone that way? Like what are we talking about? McCarthyism? Are we talking about World War? It seems like a lot of it in the last
no,
century and a half have been directed outward. The last
no.
time we directed it inward was the Civil War, but that was kind of a totally different circumstance than what we're talking about now.
There may have been historical examples with the Civil War, certainly, or that era
Like
prior to
post nine
that.
11, everybody was passionate, and that was used to go after Iraq, you know? And who can
And
blame
until the
Iran for
Patriot Act.
saying that America is the great Satan? And just to be a little
Yeah.
bit honest
So, I
about
mean, that
that,
is a
you know?
good example. Let's look at that one because we just, what did we do in the wake of 9/11? We came together. I still remember, was it like Sammy Sosa or whoever it was, baseball player, running around the whole baseball field, like not the diamond, like the whole outer, at the
Yeah.
whole outfield, the whole thing, carrying like a little handheld American flag at full sprint, and everybody's going nuts, and the wave is following him around as he runs. I remember these things. We have this huge sentiment, and then what's the next thing that happens? George W. Bush, greatest president of American history, gets a 92% approval rating. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right? And so,
Those are some
okay,
Biden numbers, man.
those are
Historical.
those. Yeah, those are. He had a 121% approval rating. Yeah, so but he has a 92% approval rating. Was actually where he peaked. We installed the Patriot Act, which has been a surveillance
Very
tool against us.
patriotic.
We create pretext to wage a war on a country that didn't even do it, which ended up, contributing to the destabilization of the Middle East that we're still dealing with in the present conflicts. And what a mess, right? And maybe there were reasons to go after Iraq at the time. Maybe there were, but they weren't the reasons we were given.
Yeah.
That's for certain. And this huge kind of both libertarian and then left-wing, anti-war movement gets this whole amount of energy. It all gets focused on the character of George W. Bush. We end up with the election of Barack Obama some years later because we couldn't have McCain. McCain was going to continue the Bush policies, and what a disaster that was. And so, in all honesty, that's where we got caught up in some pathos, and we ended up doing a lot of really not that smart things. And that's maybe not the best example, but it's an example. If we lose our heads, we lose the republic in a moment where we're actually being provoked, not here merely by a humongous act of terrorism, but in more specifically that we're being provoked by the attempted communist revolution of our country, which is being put like, this isn't just like 17 terrorists and whoever funded them and whoever coordinated with it, whatever that all is. This is unambiguous. We've got the majority of the Fortune 1000 companies in the world on board with this program, whether they want to be or not. They're pushing it. We have the federal government. We have the state governments of at least 20, probably 25 states fully on board in the kind of naked and explicit. Not even talking about like the rhino states and what they're doing. We've got the media apparatus, corporate press, all the way from top to bottom at every level pushing this. We've got all the university campuses minus Hillsdale and Liberty pushing this, or maybe there's a couple others. Grove City's probably not pushing it. But you know what I mean? Like 90-something% of the university campuses are pushing it. Certainly all the Ivies, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, Columbia. We could go down the list. We see what they're doing. Rice, like even in Texas, we see what's going on.
What does the other side have? A few school boards and some internet memes.
Well, it turns out that memes are the most effective weapon in this political war. In fact, my kind of tongue-in-cheek way of phrasing it is that allegedly, if you go up in the numbers of whatever generation war, third generation war, fourth generation war, the later number is supposed to be designed to beat the earlier number, right? And so we're in fifth generation warfare, and memes are sixth generation warfare. That's like my tongue-in-cheek remark about it. Memes are faster, they're more brutal. There's no focus group behind a meme. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You just put memes out there as fast as possible. They cut right through the image. They get right to the core of the matter. They're fast, they're essential, they're powerful, and they're the equivalent. So like what's happening in the fifth generation war, if we want to use these terms, I've talked to some like military dudes who are like, that's not the best way to talk about it. But if we call this fifth generational warfare or whatever, that's like the British lining up across the field in the Revolutionary War, and memes are like Mel Gibson, the
Guerrillas.
Patriot, running through the field with a freaking axe and a musket. It's guerrilla war. It's information guerrilla warfare. This is what memes are. And it turns out, I mean, this is Charlie's in the trees, but turns out it's memes in the Twitterverse, and it really disrupts their ability because we don't trust their programs. We get upset about what they're trying to pull. We create public outcry. We create resistance. We make them have to force issues, which every time they do that, they lose even more support. I'm not saying they won't be able to force things, but memes are a shockingly potent weapon that we kind of laugh about.
I think they're the most democratic tool at our disposal. That's sub-tyranny. They're the most democratic, non-tyrannical kind of political act, I think.
Yeah, that's why was it Owen Schroyer, or is that the one they put in jail for a meme?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like he told the Democrats to vote on the wrong day.
Yeah,
the Democrats were just joking around
day.
that. They were trying to do the same thing back, but it's just funny. It's funny who gets to do the thing.
It's like the oldest election day joke in history.
Yeah.
But yeah, because they don't like memes, because memes are effective.
Yeah. But when it turns into states saying, fuck you, Joe Biden, or whatever it is, let's go, Brandon, whatever, and saying we're closing off the border ourselves, like, and actually taking that stand, like that was an act. I just remember that because I don't know if we spoke through it, but I just remember your reaction was, it seemed like you were really worried, like, whoa, because this could spiral into constriction of power, or like them consolidating power even further. But eventually these memes have to turn into political behavior.
They do.
It has to turn into a line.
But that's the thing, is they do, because what they do is they get people to start to question what's going on, and they start to move a population. It's the pamphlets. It's like, where did the Revolutionary War come from? It was the pamphleteers. Well, the memesters are the pamphleteers of our day. They're putting out these single image pamphlets about what's really going on, whether it's, Klaus Schwab in a spacesuit eating bugs, or whether, whatever it is. And it really gets into you. You really get it. I mean, Trump was very successful back in 2016 with a meme that said Biden for resident. It said president, but the P was X'd out, and it showed him in a nursing home instead, because everybody kind of got it, right? Like it still sticks. Like that meme slaps. Trump delivered it. Trump might be one of the best comedians literally performing on the planet. And
once you see that, that's the funniest thing about Trump. I guess that's kind of a pun, and that's not intended, but like once you understand what he's doing as a marketing scheme or whatever, like it becomes clear. He looks like a brash, tyrannical, just idiot, narcissist, and he's probably all of those things to some degree or another, like we all are. But once you see that he's using comedy or something to destabilize, he's kind of doing a postmodern acid, pouring it on that
postmodern president back in the day. But the thing is he's actually not postmodern himself. He just knows how to work the postmodern environment. He understands how to operate within the Baudrillardian frame, if we want to get all philosophical about it.
Yeah.
He understands, the Gulf War did not take place mentality that like Baudrillard was describing, that we live in this like hyper fake world. We're talking about a hyper fake world. That was kind of the pretext of our conversation, talking about these uprisings on campus. Oh, the majority of the people getting arrested are not even students or faculty. What does that mean? Well, that means it's theater. It's a show. It's a show meant to wrap these kids up. It's a show meant to wrap the population up. It's episode like 6 of America 2024, written in some writer's room somewhere.
Chat GPT. I mean, it's just evergreen over and over and over and over again.
It is.
It's just totally like I could just take the footage and I have a whole, like another summer of content laying at my fingertips. I'm a little bit tired of doing that, but it's right here. But I think it was Jesse Kelly, I think that's his name. You retweeted it and then I retweeted it. He said, look at all these college campuses, but here are some documents where the Biden administration is flying hundreds of thousands of immigrants all across the country. What do we do about that? That is deeply offensive. That's deeply like, this is tyranny. Not tyranny. This is when you betray your
The other
country.
T word?
The other one, is it treason?
The other T word? Treason. Yeah.
No, not P, T.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
all in the mix too. But what do we possibly do about that? Like the amount of
Pterodactyl.
vengeance that's
Uh,
necessary to erect that
there are
crime.
things that can be done about it, but the problem is that we don't have our hands on the levers of power. The states are going to have to do everything they can about it and end up in court is what they're going to have to do. And they're going to have to do it as
Yeah, but
quickly
the
as
damage is
possible.
already done by that point. That's the brilliance of this plan, is that once
Well,
lawfare catches up, it's already done.
that's true.
And then you have
But
the
the fat
beautiful
lady in no question has sung.
optics. Yeah, of Trump
There's
rounding up all these immigrants and throwing them out. That's a perfect optic
Yeah, but they
opportunity.
just look at the polls though. The polls, this issue is not a sympathetic issue for them either. The
Hmm.
polls as of this week have now flipped. A greater than 50% of Americans support mass deportations, including 42% of Democrats. So like this problem's real. And this
Okay.
problem, their identity coalitions that they've used so far, in particular, Black Americans and Hispanic Americans are pissed off that they're getting cheated by this big time, and
Yeah.
it's very in their face. I mean, it's the biggest slap in the face that I've seen since you know this William Thomas guy jumped in a pool and said that he's a girl. It's a slap in the face to girls. Actually, it's not even when he jumped in the pool. It's when William took off his swimsuit in the locker room that the real slap happened, right? And so this same thing is it's like this is even more in your face and visible though because that was in a locker room behind closed doors. We have what's happening right now, a massive public opinion shifting on this very, very quickly. And I have a feeling that they're going to lose the reservoir of sympathy that they need. Again, sympathy is the magic recipe for a political warfare campaign of these kinds.
Mm,
I think they're going to lose the reservoir of sympathy before they launch the mass line, which
yeah.
means that this thing's going to backfire on them spectacularly too. I'm not saying we don't have a big problem. I'm not saying we won't have a huge mess to clean up. I'm not saying that some parts of the problem might be intractable, but I am saying that we are caught in a war against our country one way or the other, and this is
Yeah.
part of the combatant strategy. And so we just have to kind of, I'm not saying ignore it or just live with it. I'm saying that we do have to deal with it and we have to figure out strategies. But that starts again, like you said, your go-to was, oh, and the imagery of Trump deporting. Yeah, and look at the imagery of cops busting kids up on these college campuses. People are like, yay, I think that's going to stick. I think that's going to work. I think the reservoir of sympathy is exhausted. And if that's happened for so-called undocumented Americans, if their stupid euphemisms, I guess, their communist language become repellent to the average American, insulting to the average American, before they are able to properly launch the mass line. What's the mass line? The mass line is what happened after George Floyd died. Well, that mass line's not going to go anywhere. And as a matter of fact, it's going to be like a wily coyote pulling the trigger on his shotgun and it's shooting himself in the face somehow moment for them. And I think that this is I've been telling you for and other people
Yeah.
for a year, 2 years, that I think they're in their downward spiral where everything they do to try to force it just makes it worse. And I think that that's the case. And I think that we're kind of seeing that play out. The polling on this issue is unambiguous. The American people are not happy about it and they're getting pissed off about it. The invitation to pathos is again there, but the catharsis is there. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of solutions. One of the solutions is that you can make life very uncomfortable for so-called migrants, for criminal aliens. Many will self-deport. The problem will start to solve itself. You can start to capture criminal activity and use it as a pretext to either put in prison or deport. You can start, even if it's a mass deportation campaign, if you have the public support for it. You could even get to the point where within some possibilities within certain counties, if there's a significant enough problem, where you could deputize willing citizens to go help, to act as kind of border agents to help fill in the law enforcement shortfalls. There are a
Yeah.
lot of things that could happen,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, the optics are really tricky though, because it could very
they are.
easily become. I mean, the low level optics is just racist. You're going to be racially profiling people, and then you're going
Of
to get a
course.
lot of images.
Well,
And we've been
maybe.
taught
Then
for decades not to be racist, right? So,
but the thing is we're not really, right? Like we've got all that information that the people coming across the border are not even predominantly, Hispanic or Latin American. It's like
yeah,
there's a lot of them that aren't. So it becomes very complicated as to who's really
yeah, it's
coming
very
across the border.
complicated. Yeah, that's what I'm just
And
saying. Like
so,
optically, this is
I
very
mean,
complicated.
it's weird the way that the evil kind of lays the seeds of its own undoing here. But you're right. The optics is everything. If we take for granted and accept the proposition, and the terminology for whatever it represents, that we're in a fifth generational warfare, which is a political and information warfare environment, optics is king. That's why I keep talking about who has the reservoir of sympathy on their side, who's the sympathetic character in the media propaganda push that's going to follow anything that happens. Because just like Baudrillard said, there's what happens, and then there's the propaganda surrounding it.
Yeah.
And to switch postmodern philosophers off of Baudrillard and over to Lyotard, we're now looking at, we have this, what's permissible in society is legitimized by what people have sympathies for. And if they've lost their sympathies, they're really in a world of hurt. Now, I'm not saying this is how the world should work. I'm saying this is how the world works at present. And I'm not saying that we should maintain the world working this way, but we do have to figure out how to get back to a more grounded position. I think that a lot of it's a consequence of being new to the internet as a species, as people. It also is a lot to do with the fact that the internet, being new to the internet, became a weapon, a propaganda weapon, very, very quickly. Although I still have concerns. Like, I think TV might be worse. I still think TV is probably worse as a propaganda weapon because it's a one-way communication device. And it's not democratized. Some percentage of the information on the internet is not propaganda. All of the information on the TV is propaganda.
Yeah, I would take issue with the second one, but some of it's, I don't know, some of it's propaganda that's not think tanked on the internet information.
Well, I mean, on the TV, you got to remember that, like, just totally banal, idiotic, mindless television, like all those damn, we're going to go buy a house TV shows that, like, whatever, the demographic doesn't have anything on their TV except that. That stuff is just brain rot. That's hours of your day that you're achieving nothing enriching. You're not producing. You're not doing something valuable or useful around your house, in your yard. You're not getting exercise meaningfully. You're not taking care of your body. You're also not learning a damn thing. It's like Yuri Bezdomov said, that with education, the demoralization process through education of a population doesn't require you to indoctrinate students. It requires you to waste their time. It requires you to fill their head with meaningless nonsense in the name of education, hours and hours and hours a day. So even the stuff that's not CNN on the TV or Fox on the TV is still just a pipeline of mindlessness in a lot of cases. Now, sometimes there are spaces for art, and art can be propaganda or not propaganda. And thanks to some democratization there, we have some, compelling stuff that's worth watching. But so I'll adjust. I'm sorry, I was wrong. 99.7% of the stuff on TV is propaganda. Probably only about 85% of the stuff on social media is propaganda. Now, where it gets tricky though is the shit on propaganda on social media. I'm sorry, is way more psychologically sophisticated. Like it's bots.
Well, it
or
enmeshes you.
people
It causes
showing
you
up
to
in your
repeat it.
replies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Specifically
That too.
targeting you, as though, like, the whole little, like, very abusive thing. I used to be a huge fan of yours until you said blah, 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 blah. Like, the first time you encounter that chews your brain up. Like, it really messes with you. I was with you until you finally crossed this line. Eventually you get used to it, or eventually you get used to, calling out somebody like Tucker Carlson, and immediately you get like 85 replies that are all like, he's better than you. Like, and it doesn't affect you anymore because you're like, oh, okay, I don't know who's paying for the bot farm or the troll farm that's reflexively defending Tucker Carlson within 3 minutes of a post, but I know what you are. Like, you get used to it.
Yeah.
But
do you get used to getting put in a chokehold, throwing the guy down, and then not wanting to beat up another person? You
I
still
don't know.
there?
I watched that stuff about Mike Tyson saying that he doesn't even like who he is when he gets in the ring because like there's
Mm,
Mike Tyson and then there's Mike Tyson in the ring and he's like we're literally like two different people. Like I forget how the interview went. It was a long time ago that I watched it, but he's like I don't even like that guy. I'm scared of that guy. And it's like he
yeah,
turned
that
into a
guy gets him
friggin'
in
animal.
trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, so good luck to Jake Paul. Did that happen yet?
I don't know. I don't know. That's stuff that's the brain rot stuff that I just filter out.
It was
So
so strong though the other day because I guess there's like this whole like charity boxing like exhibition thing that they get famous boxers and then somebody who probably shouldn't be there and they do like
yeah,
fake pretend exhibition match and it was Mike Tyson with this little girl and he's down there like on his knees like doing the whole Mike Tyson like impossible head movement and stuff and he's just letting this girl kind of like he's not giving it away but he's letting this girl wail on him and I'm like what if he flips this
yeah,
girl is gonna die and then it's all sweet and they high fives and hugs and it's really cute but it's like he like that motif of him becoming such an animal like that is like was so ingrained that I saw this and I'm like no 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 you don't
yeah.
no you don't let the child in with Mike Tyson like
Do
I'm
you
sure
find
he's a sweet
yourself in
enough
that
guy in some way
situation
but
where you because you're a pugilist, you're a
I am
propagandist in your own way, if that's not
what
offensive to
no
say.
what's my
You're not.
propaganda in behalf of
Just because you believe in it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a political end. Doesn't mean that you're sculpting minds and you're changing discourse. You're influencing. Propaganda doesn't necessarily have to be
I'm going to have to look
subterfuge.
up the definition of propaganda and find out why you're wrong in a technical
I'm
sense if you
okay,
look this up.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like what you do as a political entity online is to change, shape, raise awareness, put different memes out. Memes are propaganda. I don't know how you would disagree with that, or would you say they're not
No,
propaganda?
they're not necessarily propaganda.
Okay, so you're
Propaganda
the
is
view
not
that
necessarily
propaganda is
propaganda. All right.
okay.
Define. You've done it. Define propaganda. Go.
Propaganda, and
The systematic propagation of a doctrine or cause or of information reflecting the views and interests of those advocating such a doctrine or cause, material disseminated by the advocates or opponents of a doctrine or cause, a
hmm,
congregation of cardinals established in 1622 charged with the management of missions. That's funny. But it comes from
that's from the
propagare, which
origin.
is like
Yeah,
put out. The
yeah,
College of Propaganda, that's something
yeah.
else. Any
I mean, I was
organization
using it
or
as a
plan for
neutral
spreading
term.
particular doctrine or system of
Yeah,
principles.
you're propagating a doctrine or a system of principles. That's what
Yeah, I
you're.
agree that I'm
Yeah,
propagare, but I don't think I'm doing propaganda. At least not
okay,
in its connotative sense.
yeah.
Um,
I think of it as neutral term because if you understand, I think it's important that you understand. Like you're in the ring, you're propagandizing. Like you're in a fight. It's you're Tyson in the ring, and there's Tyson out of the ring. Like, but when you're in the
oh, that's
ring,
true. I
you're.
do behave on Twitter significantly differently than in person.
That's true. That's funny. That's one of the awesome parts about you. It's like people like have like this vision of you. I'm like, well, I have this other vision of him, but I see this other vision of you. Do you see yourself like turning into that? And they're like, wait, hold
Well,
on. This is a little girl. This is a little girl. I'm not going to go
no,
James Lindsay on this little girl here. You know.
no, I think I had that period at one point where it was like that, but I think I grew out of it. Like a lot of the reason that
Mm,
I am the way that I am on Twitter now is not that compelling. Like it used to be all this stuff. Like we
yeah.
talked about it. I got a lot of shit for it for years. We don't talk about it again.
Yeah.
But
You're pretty
now
chill.
it's kind of like I'm on my phone and I don't want to type a full sentence. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
my Twitter behavior can be summarized with this. I'm fucking tired.
You're tired.
Like again, really? Again? Like my texting behavior. If you can tell if you're in my DMs on Twitter, for example, which is something I use on both my phone and my laptop. Um, you can tell which device I'm on because you might get 4 or 5 words at a time out of me when I'm on my phone, but you're going to get sentences and paragraphs and reply most of the time when I'm on my laptop
With your
because the
tippy
typing
tippies.
speed is just so
Yeah.
different. And I get so frustrated with that stupid thing. And I'm my favorite. Hold on, it's a moment. Hang on.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Yeah, my favorite conspiracy theory that I don't actually believe, but maybe, is that Google tracks your data and knows which side you're on and makes your autocorrect way worse if you're
If
on the
you're
wrong side, so that it takes way longer to type anything and you misspell shit all the time and look like an idiot. I
a
don't
good
really
one.
believe that, but that's my favorite, like, pretend
Like,
conspiracy theory.
very easy
And I
that it
guess
could
I
be the
said
case.
Google and gave away that I'm an Android person, but it could also very well be Apple.
I want to get to some super chats, but I had this question for you about what America looks like after the revolution or the counter revolution. Like, what does it look like?
Um,
Because what's the positive vision?
so everybody that wants to know what America looks like after the counter-revolution should go back and watch some of the hair metal music videos from the late 80s and early
So I
90s,
knew
because
we
that's
were going to get back
basically
to
what
the
I'm
80s
advocating.
because it's the 80s wherever you are. It's just the 80s.
That's me. Yeah.
Yeah. You want
That's
skinny
not really it.
jeans.
No, but no skinny jeans. But uh, people keep telling me I should wear short shorts, and I'm like, the fuck. I don't think
Bosses don't wear
so.
shorts. Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that's not a real answer. Although, like, I literally was watching like some old Guns N' Roses videos the other day, and I was like, people get mad. They're like, James just wants to go back to the '90s, and I'm like, that's pretty damn cool, actually. Like, people were like doing stuff. Like, people didn't really hate each other. Like, we were all like trying to be productive and have fun. Like, it's actually kind of cool. But that's not real because we have good old internet and we have a completely different
Mm-hmm.
kind of cultural situation. And so it's not going to go back to the 90s, and it really shouldn't go back to the 90s. When the kind of meme of going back to the 90s is going back to this, I feel like we had a very strong diversion into this kind of very Marxist revolutionary trend that really took off successfully culturally starting in the late 90s. And the academic literature kind of reflect that. But it really got ramped up in 2011 through 2013. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we don't have to talk about those. When we say go back to the 90s, what I think of that is more like that there was like a historical track, a train track where society could have been going, and we were on the correct track, but we're not going to go back to the 90s. We should try to be aiming for where would we have been had we not taken this exit ramp into
Oh,
political correctness and
okay.
and Marxist bullshit.
Yeah.
So I do see a more productive and harmonious and generally accepting society on the other side of the revolution, which primarily I think we could have that very quickly if the provocation machine was turned off. I think a lot of people are very fatigued with being mad at everybody all the time.
Yeah.
It's
I don't think
not going
most
to be
people
like
are.
magic,
So
but
I,
we've got a
you
lot to
know,
figure out with these device thingies. We've got a
yeah,
lot to figure out.
yeah,
Uh, before we're going
balancing
to be
that.
able to get to anything sane. Um, just the propaganda issue on them is huge. But also, as I've talked about before, I think one of the greatest perturbations that we're facing right now as a society that's generally classically liberal in its heart still, but lost, is that the introduction of digital property has completely confused what property rights even look like. How do you secure something if you don't even know what they are? You don't know what the limitations are.
Hmm.
Um, it's very, very easy to point out that these things are confused with a lot of different examples. One example is that if I go by, even with my cell phone, right? So if I go out and I take a picture of a sunset or a lion or whatever I happen to see, and I take a picture, I own the digital property rights to that picture. But if I type a text message to you and my Google keyboard records it, Google owns the rights to the message that I sent somehow. Like,
Hmm.
that's weird. Or if I generate, maybe that's, I think that is the case, but if that's not the case, if I generate metadata by visiting various websites or whatever, somebody else owns that, even though it's still user generated data by me on the exact same device by using effectively the exact same processes. And so there's some major disconnect between digital data, or in other words, digital property, and who has rights to own it and what they can do with it. And I think that at the bottom of a lot of our problems in society, besides the intentional perturbation, is that we can't defend property rights, so we can't defend individualism because we don't know what they are. We don't even know what property is. We know what physical property is. We know that this is my book, right? We
Hmm.
know that this is my physical object. We know that this is my tinfoil hat, right? We've got that. That's fine. When we get to intellectual property, it gets blurry, right? so if we're Claudine Gay, obviously, and we copy somebody's academic work like Carol Swain's, that's a problem. But if I steal your meme, can you steal a meme? Is it possible to steal a meme? It's not really possible to steal a meme. Like that's really like, so obviously the second, if I create a meme and it's going to go viral and I have all the value of possibly going viral from that meme, and then some bigger account like Elon's or some jackass decides to share the meme himself, he stole my meme and he also stole whatever, and with
Your
Twitter
glory.
paying you for engagement, he stole my economic utility.
Sure.
Right. So there's like these, whose meme was it? Like who owns that? Right. We tried to solve that problem. Maybe I think it was just a scam with NFTs, but that was really stupid in the first place because most NFTs were just memes that were already out in the wild, and you could like own like the first time somebody sent it, or I don't know what the hell you actually owned with an NFT. It's fake news. But if we don't know what property is, we can't defend property. And I think John Locke was not wrong that if we can't defend or secure the rights to life, liberty, and property, then we don't have the capacity to defend the individual at
Or
a
even
fundamental
define
level.
the
Say what?
individual. Even define the individual.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Because where do you stop and I start if like we have shared, if we're all like part of the cloud, right? Like there's a fundamentally deep philosophical question there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the world that we're going to go forward into has to reckon with that, and it has to reckon with the process of figuring that out, and it has to reckon with a lot of other things. The other thing, the world we're going into, this is my biggest positive drum to beat. I say it again, Benjamin. I said it to you, I think, first, before I even did a podcast about it. I think it was on your show. I was talking about it first, which is that I think we're entering the second enlightenment. I think that we're actually entering a marketplace of ideas that we've never had. We believe we had a marketplace of ideas, but it was managed by gatekeepers. Gatekeepers like editors, publishers, academics, journalists. And now everybody can be a publisher. Everybody can be a journalist. Everybody can do their own research. And so we're not entering into a world where we have gate-kept or feudal aristocracy-based kind of information economy. We have an open-ended marketplace of ideas where people can shop and let ideas actually compete one against another, no matter how big or small the voice is that made them. And that's exciting and different. So we're going to enter into a new world in the sense that we're going to enter into, like, if we prevent the revolution, which will try to stymie free speech, try to stymie the free flow of ideas, misinformation, disinformation, all that, we're going to enter into a genuine marketplace of ideas that mirrors the growth of the marketplace of goods and services, which means if we were to be a predicting kind of people, we should expect a period of time at the beginning where there's a lot of exploitation of that, a lot of misinformation, disinformation. And like we saw with the kind of building toward monopoly powers, you know, in the 1880s, 1890s, as the Industrial Revolution kind of came to a pinnacle. And then we're going to start kind of figuring out ways to solve those problems and deal with those things. But I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of caveat emptor on ideas for a little while. And then, which is let the buyer beware, let the reader beware.
Yeah, well,
then,
that's the problem I was talking with Leslie, my wife, about with expertism and you know, medical expertism. And you see like we have a crisis of authority because authority has been abused. Let's talk about the pandemic or just the response to the pandemic. You see these bumbling idiots, you know, there was this, I think his name's Spandrel, this dissident writer. He's like, you know, I was all for fascism, and then I saw the people who are my people get in control and make the worst decisions over and over and over again, like that were the worst possible. So I don't think I want that anymore. So, but we still need experts. We still need a doctor. And AI is this gleaming thing. Like the AI can be the expert. The AI can somehow collate enough of the expert opinions to diagnose you and prescribe the right therapy, right? To step out of the political into something more damaging, potentially more, you know, life damaging. Like what do we do with the breakdown of authority that comes with this huge wash of information? You know, kind of the meme of the doctor having to deal with the patient that has all the experts' advice from the internet. Like, I think that what you're describing here has really big ramifications on how we compose society, how we compose who is the teacher, who is the student, what is the role of the student, to what degree can a student become a teacher and have responsibility over their medical decision, over how they deal with their body, and to what degree do we need to regulate that or not regulate that anymore?
I mean, those are real questions. I mean, that's serious stuff. So those are the things that we're going to have to work on. I'm not trying to cop out and not give you an answer,
No, no,
but those
no.
are the kinds of things we're going to have to navigate.
Yeah.
But the answer is that a marketplace is going to lead to the rising tide of all. And the problem is that you do have charlatans that are going to be able to fit into the
Hmm.
picture. And how do we determine who those people are, and how do we, limit their influence? I think that censorship's not the right way. I think that
Hmm.
more information is is more effective at stopping bad information than less information is. Um, but you will have certainly pockets of misinformation that bubble up, that mislead people into making bad decisions, in the same way that when we first kind of lurched into the capitalist phase, we had scam artists that were producing bogus products, milk that was actually
Well,
water mixed with paint,
at
mixed
least we
with a
ran
little
out
bit
of
of.
scammer artists. We don't have those anymore.
But
Capitalism
I mean,
flushed
just
those down
to
the
just
drain.
to take a look, where is that problem most rampant in the world today? Is that problem most rampant in the world today in a country like the United States, where there's, you know, largely speaking, a market, or is that problem most rampant in a fully autocratic society like China? Well, it's obviously most common in China. I just read a thing today, this morning, about the things that they mix in with baby formula, though, these weird
Oh,
chemicals that are like not even
yeah.
legit. So it's like, the idea that we're going to clamp down on that and control that is more corruptible. A more closed system is more corruptible than a more open system. And so with AI, there's a lot of
Hmm.
questions to ask. Like, certainly, we don't want closed AI. We don't want a small number of actors having control over AI tools and nobody allowed to, basically have access to their own AI tools to check them. If we think of it as a tool like that, then you want to have people with, whether it's various biases or attempting to have as few biases as possible. You want those things competing with one another. That's the kinds of checks and balances that actually prevent the thing from becoming a tyrannical tool. I think it's important, and maybe I hope
Hmm.
people are capable of it, but people shouldn't be treating AI like some kind of a god. Like, look at the Chat GPT. Like, it's fucking wrong about everything. Like,
Hmm.
it's wrong all the time. It's super easy to make it wrong, to get it to tell you complete nonsense. All of these, I mean, technically they're not AI; those are language modeling models and all of this stuff. But whatever. It's very easy to allow those things to be wrong. So just like your doctor, turns out, sorry, all you MDs, close your ears for a minute, because I'm going to say
Uh-oh.
something that will hurt your fees. Your doctor's not a god. Your doctor's a consultant.
Yeah.
You're hiring your doctor for his medical advice and opinion on what you should do for a circumstance occurring in your body that you may or may not understand. You bringing more information to bear on that, as long as there's not the clashes of egos, can actually enhance that process. But if you treat your doctor as though he's a god, or you treat your AI like he's a god or it's a god, then you're susceptible to being completely misled, either by ignorance or by malice, depending on the character and the purposes. And so it's better that you think, well, that's a consultant, and what would another consultant say? In other words, what would a competing opinion say? So if you're going to have an AI medical consultation, we definitely want an open AI, and we want another AI medical consultation, which in principle should be very inexpensive. And then, because of frankly, the features of human reality, I would prefer to have that then checked off by a competent physician or two, and then make the decision, because ultimately the matter is self-governance. It's my body, it's my business to figure it
Hmm.
out. Unlike the
Hmm.
kids at Columbia, it's my job to feed myself. I don't need humanitarian aid. It's my job to figure out how to get food onto my table and onto my fork and into my mouth and into my body to its nourishment. That's my job. So at the end of the day, if I'm having a medical concern, it's my job to consult with physicians. It's or the AI or the Google or the Brave browser or whatever it happens to be, and to try to draw a conclusion about what's going on as accurately as I can. And then at the end of the day, it's my step to take, using their recommendations and the amount of authority that I'm willing to extend to them. But that's my choice too. I choose how much authority I hand my doctor over me. Oh, you have a degree from whatever. That's fine. And you're wrong some percentage of the time. So
Hmm.
I get to choose how much authority. You want to be my teacher? Well, let's see what your results are. And then if you have good results, maybe I'll submit to learning from you, which is, again, my voluntary choice. So, once and again, we come back to the individualism being kind of philosophically at the core of this, and thus self governance, and recognizing that the people that you submit authority to are consultants of you ultimately, that you're, in some sense, whether money's involved or not, hiring for the purpose. Um, but at the end of the day, that you make the decision. Individualism becomes a solution to all of these problems. Not this weird atomizing, I'm in it all by myself and alone, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who makes the decisions for me at the period. Mm-hmm. And to get religious about it, this is the point of the Christian teaching. The individual at the end of the day is the one who decides to accept or reject grace. The church, it's not corporate. The church doesn't save you. You are saved by accepting or rejecting grace. Sorry, Catholics.
So, no, James. So this has been great over the last few years to get to know you. Have these chats. We have like 50 some odd hours of us talking, and me trying not to interrupt you or getting word in here and there, and being graced with being able to ask you questions. But you went from being an atheist. God doesn't, right? Yeah. And you keep, every time I talk to you, you talk more and more Christian, mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, mumbo
what
jumbo.
Is it about? Yeah, why is that the core? Like it's not saying you're becoming a Christian, but there's something about the complex of virtues within Christianity that aligns with your values. You bring it up, you rely on it, and that is part of the doctrine that you're propagating. Where do those
propagandist?
Yeah, so how does the value stuff disconnect or connect to a transcendental belief in God? Like, to what degree does that not need? Like, you don't need the God stuff, but you want the goods stuff.
Well, I don't know what the God stuff means, and I'm not being glib. I don't know what it means. When you say transcendent, I don't know what that refers to.
Why would you write books proving that God doesn't exist if you didn't know what God meant?
Well, because I was an asshole.
Oh.
I was pissed off. I had things to say. I thought I was smart, and so I wrote some books. And I was caught up in a movement. Young I was, needed the money I did. What do you want to hear? No, the fact is that I don't.
Did you get the
I'm not
humanitarian aid that you requested?
I literally don't know what is meant by the transcendent. I'm not exaggerating in any way. Yeah. So I can't say whether I'm taking it or leaving it. I don't know what it is. I have no grasp upon what it is. I can go talk about metaphysical things and blah, blah, blah. And it still actually doesn't answer the question. People can say, well, I know what it is. It's God. And I don't really want to get into the infinite regress like conversation. Like you actually, all respect to your beliefs, you didn't answer the question. You've just posited a thing that works as the answer to the question. But because God is posited to be infinitely greater than any man and therefore completely inscrutable, you haven't said how any of it works. So your answer is fundamentally not different to me from that's just how it is.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what transcendent means, so I can't take it very far. Now, I can, however, read the precepts that are written, say, in the Gospels or in the Bible or in the epistles of Paul and whatever, and I can see what they're saying, and I can say, that makes a lot of sense. And the thing is that I'm not finding very many of them that don't make sense. And so what process, people can say, well, how did that happen if it wasn't inspired? I could name some processes by which that might have occurred, but that's beside the point. That doesn't change the fact that the advice that got codified in those books, 66 books in the Bible over centuries, it doesn't change the fact that those the information and advice in there, as far as it goes for organizing an individual life and an individual life in a broader society, it doesn't change the fact that that's very good advice. And the more of the context that you have for what is intended by that, almost more accurately that advice applies. So I don't know that I'm asking for the goods, because I'm not asking for salvation, because I don't even know what that means. Um,
Hmm.
that's
And
the
you're
real good.
comfortable not
The goods
knowing. That's
isn't the
just,
advice, by the way. The goods of the gospel is not the advice. The goods are, if the gospel is true, is salvation uh, from your state of sin. It's a completely bigger picture goods, and I'm not asking for that goods. But as a book of advice and illustrative stories on how to organize your life and with others and live, it's full of some really damn good ideas.
hmm.
Plus, why is this happening? Well, I'm forced. I speak in churches all the time. I'm forced by the company that I keep. They put me on the spot. What are you reading in the Bible, James? Charlie Kirk asked me this literally every time. All right, Charlie, it's Acts. Acts 18. What is it? Yeah, 18, 9, 10. You should go read Acts 18 verses 9 and 10. I was reading Acts 18 most recently. So there you go. That's what it is today. I'm not putting that much effort into it. I'm in the middle of all this other stuff, but it's not that I put no effort in, and I'm always on the spot. So I have to have answers. I'm trying to communicate to, since I speak in Christian circles very frequently
Yeah.
and in churches more specifically, I'm trying to communicate to that audience as clearly as possible in terms I understand. And it just so happens, like, as I sat back, like for the last year, a year ago or so, I started writing a book. I never finished. I need to go back and complete it, about dealing with political warfare. What kind of principles, like, what is it? How does it work? Okay, that's James Lindsay stuff. What principles do you need to be able to deal with it? And it's like, shit, that's in the Bible. 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 So why not couch this in language that makes sense to a Christian audience and say, well, the answer is that you turn the other cheek, and here's what that means, and here's what I mean by it in this context. The answer is shake the dust from your feet, which comes from this, part of Matthew 10. The answer is, wise as serpents, gentle as doves. If I want to talk about communist subversion, why not use that as a perfect example of how they lie and tell the truth at the same time?
Hmm.
Jesus in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 says, I send you out into the world. You need to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And the communist subversive way of approaching this is to say, did you hear that Jesus said, be gentle? Leaves off the wisdom part, leaves off the discerning part, leaves off the paying attention part. The part that actually makes it functional is that you have both of those ingredients. And it's like, did you hear that? Jesus said, be wise as serpent, or it said, be as gentle as doves. And so what do you have now? You have fools that are going to get run over on their niceness principles. Well, this is an easy way to communicate what's happened to a subverted church. And then it also gives you the ability to communicate how the reaction works. So what's the reaction? The reaction is that people come along and say, the problem is that we're gentle as doves. It's time to be hard asses. And what is actually, were they wrong? No, the problem is being gentle as doves without the discernment. And Jesus did say, be gentle as doves, but he also said the discernment part. So what you end up is, by one step of infiltration and subversion, you lose the gospel and you turn into something that is not good advice, but poisonous advice. And then that eventually causes a bad reaction, and a counter reaction arises that, rather than going back to the precept as it was given, throws out the baby, not just the bathwater.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you end up in a ditch. And so this is an extraordinarily good way. That's a very complicated concept to discuss with people in the abstract. It's an extraordinarily good way to communicate that to an audience, who will then see it as tied to something that they see as fundamentally accurate and true, literally, for Christian believers on a transcendental level, timelessly, eternally perfect advice. And so it gets an audience to take it very seriously. But I'm not doing it disingenuously, because I take the advice very seriously too. I think it's exactly right. I'm not very good at the gentle as doves part. Won't kid you about that. But I do understand that being discerning and gentle is the way. And it's the way that we should be proceeding, and it is part of the answer. I understand, and it's immediately before that where Jesus says to shake the dust from your feet. I do understand that when you're trying to communicate to somebody who doesn't want to hear you, that eventually your job isn't to continue to browbeat them, it's to shake the dust from your feet and go somewhere else. If they want to come talk to you later, fine. Let them know where you stand. In other words, proclaim the truth, which is what you're commanded to do in that part of Matthew 10, and then shake the dust from your feet when they don't want to hear it. So in other words, stop trying to convince the woke people in your life to change their ways. Go find people who are ready to hear what's going on and build from them and let those other people come back around later. You've got to be willing to shake the dust from your feet. So, I mean, do I think that that's good advice? I know it's good advice. I know it's the better way to deal with these situations. I have tons of my own experience in dealing with these things.
Yeah.
And so why not communicate it that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess a Christian would ask, and I guess I can hear Christians. Well, if Jesus is saying all these things, why not believe in Jesus? And I can hear you saying, I'm just positing this, that like, well, I don't even know what would mean to believe in Jesus, but he is kind of like a character that you are, like a literary character that you are interacting with constantly. It's kind
Sure.
of like a rabbi for you, like a teacher. He's
Yeah,
like one of
fine.
your
That's fine.
teachers.
I see it that way. And my thing with Christianity is I can't come by it honestly. I don't believe
Yeah.
that a literal resurrection occurred or that it's even necessary to save me or humanity from a state of sin. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily see that as part of what I buy into. So it would be very dishonest of me to say,
Yeah.
well, I'm a Christian. But would it be dishonest of me to say something like Richard Dawkins said, well, I'm culturally Christian? No, that's obviously true. It's like very obviously my cultural background. It's the roots of most of the stories I understand. Am I convinced that the gospel is filled with really great things that you need to understand to navigate life successfully? Yeah, sure. So maybe he was a great teacher. I know that that's offensive to Christians.
Do you think the gospel is probably one of the best roadmaps towards this alternative America? If we can do the revolution, counter revolution, get it all hashed out, would that be like one of the top 5 books to
Yeah,
describe what
top 5 for
America?
sure. It is. I think it's the necessary roadmap, as a matter of fact. The guidance is talking about dealing with the exact kinds of provocations and temptations that we are being faced with right now. And the idea of Christ living a perfect life, which is what the gospel is partly about, is that he flawlessly navigated that situation. At least that's the story. And so I
Hmm.
think that that's an extraordinarily valuable thing. Now, the Bible more broadly is also the idea of looking at the Old Testament, which is not Jesus. I mean, the Christians will say yes, it is, but that's its own theological thing. But the Jews might not agree with them. Looking at the Old Testament it's very, very clear that this is a story of a people who sometimes managed to get their act together and
Hmm.
avoid calamity, but didn't always, and often fell by the wayside, often lost the path, and were often had to be called back to the path. And when they did, things got better. It's a story of a people for whom very many bad things happened, some of which ended up working out, and not all of which worked out. And there's a lot to be found in that as well. Um,
Hmm.
so it's the whole thing is an excellent guidebook for the circumstances we find in. That's why when I sat down, I didn't sit down and say I'm going to write a book about dealing with political warfare and I'm going to base it on the Bible. I started to write a book about political warfare and dealing with political warfare, and it was like, what should I title this section? I should title this section "Turn the Other Cheek." What should I title this
Hmm.
section? I should title,
Hmm.
whatever. And the most fitting titles are so freak. I mean, not all of them. Some of them are pretty granular and specific to political warfare tactics, like Name the Dynamic. But
Yeah.
other ones, it was just like, this is a Bible story. This is a Bible story. This is a Bible story.
Huh. Can I do some super chats? They're all stacking up. Do you mind? There's
I mind. No, of
Okay,
course.
he
Go ahead.
minds. What does
He doesn't.
I don't know. This might be coded, but I'm not sure. What does a Gnostic sex cult have to do with the far left's goal of destroying capitalism? This guy
That
named Bot is going off
that
about
is
this
code.
Gnostic sex cult. So I don't know what that has to do with.
That's super coded, and so we're just not going to answer that question,
Okay,
except
so
for
I figured that. So we're just okay. That's why I figured that. Yeah,
can't
there's a
fool
number
me,
of
bot.
people ask that. Um,
Yeah, I
love
bet
the
there's a whole
recent.
bunch of them. Make all you people come. I know you're watching. I know you make Benjamin lots of money. Give super chats. Just keep doing it.
So James Beach says, love the recent ND work, New Discourses work. DEI equals stochastic entryism was great.
Yeah,
Love the other UN occult videos. The Gnostic stuff really seems like a twisting of all good beliefs. Even Buddhism is twisted, watered down. How is
Well, I mean, so
are you still
this is a
riding the
different.
Gnostic train? Like, where are you at with your Gnostic
Yeah, I
project?
mean, well, that's what's happening. Like I did a thread about it earlier today. So like
Yeah,
it's
okay.
still a thing. It's not going away. The bourgeoisie is the demiurge and it's structuring society. It's
The
oppressing people and
bourgeoisie is the
alienating them.
demiurge.
What? I'm
That
serious.
sounds
I'm
kind of
dead
Gnostic
serious.
sex culty, I'm saying. I mean, my demiurge, it's kind of like a
No,
semi-urge.
that's just a linguistic coincidence. Demiurge comes from demiurgos, which is means artisan or builder in
Yeah.
Greek.
Okay. Yeah, and the
And so
bourgeoisie are the ones who are tinkering around with
they
society
are the
and building
ones that
this
are the builders
portfolio.
and the architects of the existing value system of
Yeah.
society, the
Yeah.
structure of society in the kind of material structuralist sense that is the Marxist analysis. And so they operate like an evil demon that alienates the proletariat from their true nature, sets them at odds against one another, makes them individualistic and competitive. The whole structure is the Gnostic structure. It's rather than a transcendent realm, it's now a socioeconomic realm in
Mm.
which the structure of the universe plays out, because that's where the belief system got moved, and then it just got reconstituted in that position. So
Over and
Marxism
over and over
is
again.
the
Yeah.
Gnostic. It's the Gnostic heresy or Gnostic
And what's
mythology
what's the
reconstructed.
counter to that? The non-heretical point of view that's
Truth,
counter to that. So
the
truth,
truth.
which is people who work hard and live orderly lives are a benefit to society. And if you don't
Yeah.
want to work hard and order your life, you will cause the downfall of society. And
So
communism is not going to save you.
the Gnostic belief is that behind the veil of the demiurge in his creation of the world, there's a secret higher truth that we're being kept from. And of course, the Gnostics believe that they alone have it. They have access to the secret truth. So you have to follow
Okay.
them like a cult
Which is a
leader,
lie. This is a
which is a
lie.
lie. No,
Okay.
what's true is that which corresponds to physical reality, or to reality more broadly. So, therefore, what is true is that which can be demonstrated by any person, and you don't have to have any secret sauce. You don't have to have somebody reveal it to you. You don't have to
Yeah,
find the hidden
and
meaning.
culturally, what does that mean? Like in our behavior, what's the true behavior? What's good behavior that is being obscured by this
I mean,
Gnostic bullshit?
that's way too broad of a question to answer in like any short amount of time. What's good behavior? I mean, Lou Holtz gave the used to give what he called the do right rule. The football coach Lou Holtz: do right, don't do wrong, and if you aren't sure, ask the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
Do right, don't do wrong. There you go.
Okay. Because the Columbia kids might think that they're doing right, but I don't know.
Yeah,
They're
they're
just
wrong.
cringe. Yeah.
They are
What
cringe.
does
You can judge them by their fruits. Jesus said they're cringe.
what does Western society mean? There are Eastern non-Christians who are capitalists that Marxists are trying to hijack. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say it's about abolishing capitalism, period, rather than Western society? I wonder if that you have track.
This looks like more bait. Um,
Okay.
So I don't really want to dive into the pile of bait that I'm sure. Imagine wasting your entire Wednesday trying to bait me because you're that desperate to appease your cult leader.
It's good for my
What a sad
channel.
fucking state. But it is good. That was a huge super chat. That's $100 that person just wasted. What is
In
Western
MX, I don't
society?
know what MX is. That's a
Well,
very
you should just
that's
go
crazy.
look up like the
Yeah.
Treaty of Westphalia. You can look into the legalistic tradition that arose following the Magna Carta and the British Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment. You
Yeah.
can look at classical liberalism, the individualism that's the heart of it, and the securing of the relevant rights.
I guess like the beneficial way of interpreting that is that there's capitalists that are being hijacked that are not part of Western society or Western culture. So this stuff
Yeah,
is
that's fine.
transcending. They're just, I guess, so the attack isn't just on Western values.
Um, That's because the Gnostic parasite attaches to whatever the hell it needs to, and it
Okay,
adapts
it's just a
itself
virus.
accordingly. That's why Mao led Chinese. He called it Marxism with Chinese characteristics. So if you read
Yeah.
the weird books Mao actually wrote, he didn't write his book of quotations. That was a compilation by somebody else. If you read the books that Mao actually wrote, it's all this weird shit where it's very obvious that he was taking Marxist doctrine and trying to blend it with like Taoist yin yang polarity stuff. So he's trying to give it Chinese characteristics and explain it in kind of
Mm.
Chinese terms. It's very obvious that he connected it to like where kind of Western or literally Marxism inverts the Christian value structure, like we talked about at the beginning. It's very clear that he's inverting the familial piety of the Confucian value system.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
So we just adapted it to the culture that it was located in. It has to do that, or else it's alien. It's like when they took CRT over to Britain, and all the British people were like, "What? We didn't really do that." Like
Hmm.
all this American Jim Crow, we didn't have a Jim Crow. Like that's not a thing. So like
Yeah.
this is this is just a game to try to make me say capitalism because there's a cult on the line that's having a meltdown that
Okay.
says very idiotically that I don't ever say that the root of this is capitalism, which is like A, blatantly false, and B,
Wait,
like,
the root of all evil is capitalism? Is that what they're
yeah,
saying?
but this is like a
Okay.
child's reading of the Communist Manifesto. Like, how many years have I been on stage saying, for example, that Karl Marx said in the second chapter of the Communist Manifesto that communism can be summarized in a single sentence, the abolition of private property, which isn't even really a sentence, but maybe it is in the original German. How many years? But then I say, but when you read the economic and philosophic manuscripts, he says that that's not enough. That's called crude communism. And crude communism isn't the same as what he really means. The true communism is the positive transcendence of private property as human self-estrangement and a return to being fully human. It's so much more than that. But what's actually being thrown into question is individualism. The reason that they hate capitalism is because capitalism is premised
Okay.
off of the idea of owning private property. And the problem with private property is that if you have private property like your hat, and I have private property like my hat, and I can say this is mine and that is yours, then you and me are not the same. We're not part of the same super entity, which is called a species being. Jesus Christ, get a life, people.
Okay. Um, I think it's pretty cool that you like Marx brought you to Jesus. You read all that Marx stuff. You memorized it back and forth, and now you're going through the Bible because that was like the counter that you found. You're like, okay, well, how do I guide
No, I'm
myself through
mostly going
this?
through the Bible because I speak in churches and because Charlie Kirk
Okay,
makes me.
yeah, whatever you say, whatever you say. Is it enough to destroy the universities? This is a question. I'm just to
Yeah,
raise
that
the
doesn't look like the
universities.
question on the screen.
Well, I see a pattern of
Okay.
radical leftism around 20 years ago. IMO, no true win till the universities are cleansed, since that seems to act as a
Okay, so the
vector.
universities are the epicenter of where the betrayal of Western society happened. I mean, that's where it started.
Yeah.
That's how the long march through the institutions worked. The long march through the institutions was Rudy Deutschke's analysis of how Mao Zedong was successful in his march through power. And the
Hmm.
universities are where that occurred. They understood that the path to the entire professional tier of society and thus to controlling the means of production of Western societies like United States, Western Europe, westernized nations that are not and that are like kind of economically westernized like Japan. So technically Japan's obviously very eastern, South Korea is very eastern, but at the same time they've adopted kind of western economic and uh, mores. Okay, so fine. What they realized is that the means of production that are happening with that are happening at the tier of the professional managerial class, and they had to infiltrate that. But the gateway to the professional managerial class is not, turns out, standing out in the street and throwing rocks. It turns out that it's going to Harvard. It's going to Stanford. It's going to Columbia. It's getting the jobs and getting, consultant positions. It's going into education at all levels, taking over the colleges of education, the administrator positions, and so on. And you don't have to have everybody. You have to have a significant number. So I
Yeah.
think that we will not be out of the woods until, well, it's more complicated than this. The university's future looks like this: massive irrelevance first. The next step, by one means or another, is that the universities become decreasingly relevant to our society overall. It is no longer seen as the pathway to a good job because, in fact, not only is it cringe, but it's also not the pathway to a good job because, as we see, people are going to, what's the magic word of the month? Divest.
Hmm.
Divest from the college degree as an indicator of higher ability. People with college degrees will be generally judged as a liability rather than as a potential asset. And only through interviews and demonstrated skills that you didn't have to have a college degree to get will that actually be able to be overcome. So the irrelevance of the university is the next phase. Maybe that's where it stays. Maybe the university just becomes this kind of fringe thing that some people do, and we find some other way to validate professionals and validate knowledge production since they've become so corrupted. Or maybe, which is what I think, that
Hmm.
in the space of irrelevance that they enter into, what happens next is that they desperately clamor to get their former stature back. And in the process of desperately clamoring to get their former stature back, they largely start to reform. Maybe they do so superficially, and maybe they do so on a profound level. I think that academics who care about academia and who care about the university model and believe in the university model and what it provides to society and to the lives of young people, therefore have an immense duty to start doing the audit of academic everything that needs to happen. What's going on in the administration? There needs to be lots of whistleblowing. What's going on in hiring and promotion? There needs to be expose and whistleblowing. What's going on in academic production? Like all this plagiarism we're seeing, the grievance studies affair that exposed the quality issue, that's all validating professors, even departments, entire departments being built out of whole cloth. It's frankly, because academic work is what it is. It's very difficult to read. It's very difficult to understand. It's very removed from the everyday public. And when the everyday public criticizes it, they get told they're not experts. They have no standing to criticize it, even though it's transparently idiotic. It's going to take academics doing this. And I've been saying since the grievance studies affair, 2016, I probably started saying it, but 2018 is when it came out, that a massive audit of academic institutions at every level needs to start occurring. And until that audit takes place, and it is the responsibility of willing academics who want to save the university model to do it, and academia to do it. Until that audit takes place, the universities will continue to decline in relevance. They will eventually, they may be very close to falling into the position of being a societal laughingstock, or just kind of a repository of cringe. And
I don't know. That professional managerial class is just so big that what percentage of our economic, is just wasted on people in these professional positions. They're not going to just vanish. Maybe HR departments will just.
It's very, very unclear how that's going to get dealt with. Yeah. It's very, very unclear how that's going to get dealt with. But there is now a growing realization in the corporate space. I know there is, because I hear about it all the time. And now people are starting to say it publicly, that they are stopping hiring Ivy grads. They're stopping the hiring of college grads. They're more hesitant to hire college grads. And this is just going to accelerate until either this audit starts. It's a 20-year process. Like, there's no changing that fact. You've allowed 50 years of fraud to contaminate, or whoever has allowed 50 years of fraud to contaminate the entire system. It's not getting cleaned out overnight. So I also don't think it's on its own, a necessary or sufficient condition to preventing the revolution.
This one, you don't have to touch it, but I agree with your views. This is from Jennifer Terry. I agree with your views on Marxist students, but is there no validity in criticizing Israel's killing of civilians, past and present, or the total submission of our government to Israel all these years? Today, I think you retweeted somebody else who was, there's a bunch of laws that are being put in place, hate speech laws, specifically targeting anti-Semitic speech. It's really odd that the government would want to suppress our speech for this one particular group. There is one interesting thing about the Israel-Palestine thing, is that it's not just clear cut.
Yeah, well, so the liberal principle in general is that good faith criticism of all entities at all times is on the table. So if we were to set aside the Israeli government from journalistic inquiry, from criticism where criticism is accurate and due, then we would be committing the same kind of sin as saying that we must criticize them, or we must blame them, or we can't criticize the other side, or that's the exact same problem. So of course we should be investigating, trying to find the truth, and criticizing that which deserves criticism. I don't think that there's a particularly clear question in this case. So I take the side that I take. I'm not giving the Israelis a carte blanche like they've done nothing wrong. That's preposterous. But it's there are a wide variety of reasons why. Like, for example, that I've read the Hamas charter, that in a conflict between Israel and Hamas, it's not a question which side
Hmm.
I take, as to which one's
What about like
the moral
the
high
United
ground.
States government pouring so much money into Israel and Ukraine?
Well, those
What's
are
your
two
take on that?
countries for two different purposes.
I know, but it's like it's all bundled together. They do this.
Well,
They're
that's
just
because we
throwing all this
do
money over
stupid
there.
things like we don't do single issue bills in Congress, but we have these
Okay.
omnibus spending things. They're not the same thing. Um, what's
Tinfoil
going on
Hattie,
with
you don't think it's just this divestment or this laundering scheme of the
I
American
think the
or
laundering is happening in Ukraine for damn sure.
yeah.
I don't think that Israel is necessarily a laundering scheme. Like the Iron Dome isn't cheap to run.
Okay.
Like you can actually watch videos of your tax dollars exploding with Israel.
I
You
know.
cannot watch videos of your tax dollars disappearing into like a Zelensky bunker.
Yeah. Okay. Are you of the mind that we should be a world government supporting, I guess, Israel's complex question of, allyship and stuff like that? But like, there's a American first kind of sentiment with the MAGA, with the Trumpianism.
Uh-huh.
Are
I'm not an
you,
isolationist. Peace
you're
through
not in
strength is
isolation?
real.
Okay.
Peace. The reason that we have the global economic situation that we've all benefited from for the last 30 to 40 years is down to really three words: United States Navy, keeping the seas in the position to where that's actually possible to do these kinds of shipments and whatever
Yeah.
is just unambiguous. So peace through strength. What do we mean? Well, you can be as MAGA isolationist as you want. At last I checked, MAGA supports Donald Trump, right? And so did Donald Trump achieve peace in the Middle East by saying no more wars, guys? No, he achieved peace in the Middle East by putting an all caps tweet out that said, Iran, if you ever threaten us again, I'm going to do something to you that you're going to wish you were never born. Peace through strength. And so if you're not
Hmm.
willing to project, this is just a fundamental reality. It's like a guy coming up behind you to choke you at a party. If you are weak, somebody stronger will. Not everybody's good. We're
Yeah.
not all out there just for good. Some people will try to flex their advantage and take advantage of situations, and some things are ambiguous morally. Some things are actually just sometimes people are just bad guys. And if you are not willing to be able to project strength to prevent the encroachment of bad guys, in other words, if there's not a sheepdog to prevent the wolves, then the sheep are sitting ducks. And you actually have to have that. So isolationism doesn't resonate with me on that. Now, the idea that Trump
Hmm.
wasn't going to start wars, well, he didn't start wars, but that's partly because he told Iran, for example, and he told North Korea, for example. Remember when he was making fun of Rocket Man and everybody thought there was going to be like a nuclear war?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it wasn't because he was like, let's sit down at the table and be buddies and we're just not going to, and we won't start wars. It's because Trump's doctrine was, I don't want to start a war, but by fucking God, I will, and I'll finish it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not this kind of like dumbass isolationist attitude either. Like that doesn't work. It, it's
Hmm.
that's a strategy to that's the same strategy as let's all go hole up in the countryside when Mao takes over and we'll be okay. No, it took Mao 7 years with 1950s technology to cover every inch of China and to take control of every inch of it. It's a matter of you're waiting until the bad guys gather enough strength to be able to roll you. And so, and plus, I mean, John Donne said, "No man's an island." We we genuinely do interact with the rest of the world, and not all of the actors in the rest of the world have the American. You can say whatever you want about the American government, but you're American people, and they don't all have your best interests in mind either. The United States government is certainly not blameless, and I'm not going to go full Tucker Carlson on this right now either. But the fact of the matter is that Jesus Christ. The fact of the matter, see, I can't be a Christian because I'd have to give up my favorite declaration. Um, the fact of the matter is that if we're not willing to step into the ring and say we stand for these principles and maybe we're not going to be perfect, but we're going to fight for good in this world, then they win. They win eventually. And the Chinese will play a 200-year game with you. They are right now. They're playing a 100-year game actually to destroy the
Hmm.
West. Uh, the Iran's not any different. They'll play a long game as well. I mean, the
Hmm.
caliphate's been trying to build up since like the 11th century.
Well, if the commies can go on this long, why wouldn't these other entities do
Yeah.
these long
So
marches,
no,
these long arcs?
yeah, MAGA, but I'm MAGA like Trump was MAGA, right? And Trump didn't start any new wars, but he wasn't afraid to.
Which was a great deterrent.
Well, Trump dropped a freaking Moab, which is the biggest bomb that's not a nuke you can drop on somebody. So like,
Where did he do that? I'm sorry, I'm very
I don't
ignorant,
remember.
but okay.
As he would put it, in some shithole country.
Left
I
coast
forgot. I forget where it was. We can look it up. It happened. Mother of all bombs. It's a acronym. Moab. It's the largest non-nuclear ordinance that the military possesses. Let me find this. Trump. I mean, if
Let me
only we
see.
had devices. Moab. Afghanistan. Trump drops a mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. The decision to employ the first Moab also revealed the Trump's administration revised chain of command. Blah 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 blah. That was in. It was actually this month in 2017. So that was 7 years ago. So let's not pretend that it's like he was unwilling to engage in military strikes where military strikes were needed. Now it's all going to be James the neocon.
Do you think the second enlightenment will be inhibited or facilitated by AI, woke AI? Do we need an enlightenment AI, or is it really on
We need
the
open
individual?
AI.
Open
We
AI.
need AI.
Okay.
We need open as much. Basically, what we need is as much AI as possible. The question as to whether it's helping or hurting the woke AI is actually a fun and interesting question. Like in its direct application, it's hurting because it's censorship and misdirection and all of this stuff. And the fact of the matter is, though, that because people can see it, it might actually be helping. Like there's a lot of people out there who are fully aware that AI is bullshit right now. And we actually need a lot of that attitude. We need a lot of people thinking that some blue-haired midriff showing goofball at Google is deciding what answers the AI is going to give. And, we need that. So is it helping or hurting at the moment? I don't know. But what we need is if AI is going to be a research and communications tool, which it is, we need the broadest spectrum of that possible with its controls in the largest number of hands. So we definitely don't want to have strongly restricted AI. Of course, the Biden administration wants strongly restricted AI, so that's another pretty good heuristic.
Why wouldn't
that's
they?
Not what we want.
Why
Yeah,
wouldn't
no
they?
kidding. It's like telling about how fit and healthy Biden is and how smart he is and how he didn't get lost. He was just taking a stroll. I know it was just across the lawn.
Why,
But
if they're so all powerful, you think they would have put in a transplant to Biden, or maybe the point is to make him act like a fool, just to humiliate us.
If ever a moment has arisen for the hat.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why
he's a
haven't
clone.
they? Yeah, why haven't they cloned him? Why didn't they make a better clone?
Hold on, I can
Why not a better clone?
They did. Why not a better clone? Low tech.
Yeah.
Low tech. It's like a bad 3D printer. Holy crap! Take the hat off. Wow, say some crazy stuff with the hat on.
No.
Flag.
John Hyatt. Any thoughts on John Hyatt and his work? Chris Olin thinks you guys overlap a lot. I know you know of him. Have you guys worked?
John's work is interesting. He's a squish. I don't know if I think he's right that the university has to make a decision, that academia has to make a decision. So we'll start with
Truth
John
over
Haidt's
justice
right
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, truth versus activism. I actually think that like we have schools of divinity, like the Princeton, School of Divinity or whatever,
Yeah.
and then we have like real Princeton that we actually need like schools of mysticism that just splinter off. So if you want to do social justice shit, that's in the School of Mysticism.
Yeah.
And so fine, you got like a master's of mysticism, and like, can you get a job with a M mist? I don't know, but at any rate, I don't think the dividing line is necessarily STEM versus humanities. I think that the dividing line is pursuit of academic rigor versus basically reflexive alchemical pursuit, intellectual alchemy, and that he's completely
reflexive.
Right.
What did you say? You're just saying circle jerking, but you use this really beautiful phrase. Reflexive, self-reflexive what?
I don't know what I said. Reflexive something.
Yeah. Okay.
Reflexivity is the concept that George Soros put forth. He says that reflexivity is defined not in terms of seeking truth, but as scientific method, but instead of operational success. What reflexive means is generating feedback loops, self-referential.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
what
jerking
Weinstein called
off.
ideal laundering. It is.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what all of these activist departments do. And there needs to be a dividing line. I think John Haidt is exactly right that the universities will continue to fall into irrelevance or be committing
Well, I mean, do you think
university
his
suicide
his
as long as
way
they
of getting
continue.
that by being the rational guy, speaking truth,
No.
going on PBS is the way to forward?
I mean, it helps a little. He's a
Yeah, it
squish.
helps.
It doesn't, at the
Uh,
end of the day, I don't think he's diagnosing why this problem is happening. He's not, to my knowledge, maybe I don't keep up with him. So he's not using the C word, which isn't the C word that's really popular in England. And
oh, okay. Mm.
it's the C word that rhymes with domunism or communism
Palmunism. You know, there was
or
this part in one of his
communism.
books where he goes through these moral tests that he subjected people to, where you read and like he's studying your
Yeah.
disgust reflex, and he does use the
Yeah.
C word liberally in those things. It's hilarious to hear him reading it out
Yeah.
loud.
But to have the idea be that that the problem is, in fact, you know, Western Marxist or communist provocation, and that we need to deal with it as such. Like, you are not going to rational communists out of communism. And at some point, you can convince other people that they're behaving irrationally or erratically or unacceptably. But without putting the proper label on what it is that we're dealing with, you don't quite convey the depth of what it is or what their commitment to it is. And
Hmm.
so, as long as you stay soft to naming what it actually is, it's it's just going to continue.
Hmm.
His moral foundations work is fascinating. I used to be really into it, and now I think it's a bit sus. I actually
Why?
just think, because I think that I don't think that certain people have greater or lesser access to the different moral foundations. I think that
Okay.
if we think of them like he does, which is like they're kind of like moral taste buds, I think all people have all of them, but that they express them in different ways. So I actually think that like almost every one of them splits into two, if you wanted to make it so that, you know, the left wing has these and the right wing has those. But like
Yeah.
the left wing obviously has a loyalty
Purity,
foundation.
loyalty.
They
Yeah.
have a strong purity foundation. Like those are allegedly completely missing. They just
Yeah.
express them differently.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's
so
what
I
was
feel
always
like
my thought with that. Yeah.
it was a very interesting and probing direction of research, but it was insufficiently granular to catch what's really going on.
Yeah. Speaking of insufficiently granular or sufficiently granular, what's next for new discourses? Where are you embarking on?
I
The
mean, I'm not
queering of the
embarking
American
on a
child
damn
is
thing.
doing
I'm in the
pretty
middle
good,
of a
right?
bunch of stuff is my
Oh, okay.
problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle of a huge research project on the trans stuff, actually, which we'll see what that produces.
Which
I'm
part, may
continuing.
I ask? Which aspect of it are you examining?
I am trying to outline in a more understandable way why it is an ideological phenomenon that has cult-like characteristics.
Okay. All right. So expanding on the work of Logan Lansing and you and queering
Yeah.
of the American child. Okay.
Yeah, sort of. I've also, interestingly, I found the missing link. I'm very excited about that.
Ooh,
Yeah. So the big question has always
the
been, you get
third
these arguments. I
gamete.
know you get to have these, right? So you talk to the feminists, and they're like, it's not queer theory. It's John Money and these perverts, right?
Yeah. Or
You've heard
patriarchy.
that? I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
you've heard this. I'm sure you've heard this. No, it's all these horrible men, Michel Foucault and John Money, and somehow Judith Butler gets written out of this. Well, I was reading this book called Deviations by Gail Rubin, who is considered to be the woman who wrote the first paper in queer theory, which was Thinking Sex. The paper was in
Ooh.
1984, and she calls for a new radical politics of sex and sexuality in that particular paper. That's what the point of it is, and that became queer theory half a decade later. So Gail Rubin, her, has a book called Deviations. That's a very peculiar book. And I was reading Deviations the other day because I'm looking for this missing link. The question was, how does it's very obvious that John Money's goofball conception of gender is what's being used in queer theory. But it's not clear how it got there because they won't talk about John Money. But then I found the missing link. So somewhere not that far into Deviations, Gail Rubin gets called out by another writer who wrote a book about gender that's also crazy pants and says it's very obvious that Gail Rubin's construction of gender derives from John Money, but she never cites him. Blah, 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 blah. So Gail Rubin, pride wounded apparently, decides she has to respond to this in this new book she's writing, Deviations, and she writes in about a page, of course I used John Money's formulation of gender, and of course I didn't cite him. You don't cite John Money, blah, 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 blah. I took John Money's idea of gender and I plugged it into a Marxist framework, combined it with Freud, and added in social constructivism, and that's my idea of gender. And so I'm like, oh, that's what queer theory thinks about gender. Okay, so it is John Money's idea mixed with Marx and Freud expressed through social constructivism. Bingo. Gotcha.
Well,
missing link.
Could you just for sake of any listeners who aren't aware of John Money's idea of gender, what is John Money's idea of gender? Just in a
So John Money isn't exactly a social constructivist, so we've got to be pretty clear about this. But John Money's idea is that gender somehow floats above sex, right? Yeah. So it's somehow independent. So you could take, in principle, a baby, probably still in utero for John Money, because it's not all social, it's also chemical. You could wash the baby with certain hormonal influences or chemical influences. You could raise the child with certain social influences after it's born, and also certain endocrine influences. And this mishmash of endocrinology, both in utero and after birth, plus social conditioning, can cause, no matter what the underlying biological substrate, male or female, the primary sex characteristics or even secondary sex characteristics of the person, that their gender identity, which is a term he coined, can take on any form that the chemicals and social conditioning lead it to be. And so it somehow floats above your sex and is actually malleable. We may not know all the inputs and all the variables, but we know it has to do with, neonatal, according to him, testosterone levels, estrogen levels, other chemicals, and then same thing after birth. And so this idea that you could not just, secondary sex characteristic masculinize a young woman through extraordinarily high doses of testosterone with puberty suppression so that she isn't producing estrogen. You wouldn't just outwardly secondary sex characteristics masculinize this individual. You could also fundamentally masculinize them if you did the hormones, the endocrine stuff, and the social environment correctly. In other words, social transition and medical transition follow kind of hand in glove from John Money's almost to a T failed experiments, mostly on intersex children. And
surgically wounded.
The key is, for me, for the work that I do, is that this weird idea that gender is something that floats above sex that can be modified in the individual pretty much almost with infinite flexibility, of John Money's got imported and turned social constructivist by the sex-positive radical feminists who created queer theory. So they were attaching it to the existing gender constructivism that they had already subscribed to and ran with it by, in Gail Rubin's exact words, mixing it with Marx, Freud, and putting it into a social constructivist frame, which is exactly what I thought had happened, but I had no evidence that this had happened until I find this, tyrannical paragraph or two of Gail Rubin flipping out that somebody called her out for stealing John Money's work without admitting it, in which she's like, of course I did. And then this is what I did with it. I took Money, mixed him with Marx, added in Freud, and put it in a social constructivist frame. And that's the basis of gender in queer theory.
And the deconstruction or the revolutionization of gender and sex.
That's right. That's right.
Marching through feminist dogma.
Now, of course, Money also worked with Kinsey, who was a zoologist, and who so the two of them both worked in significant measure to try to understand human sexuality as well. And so John Money is very famous for his book about gender, which would be called something like Man, Woman, Boy, and Girl. But then he's also written another book that's called Gay, Straight, and In Between, where he tries to talk about sexuality in exactly the same terms. And the second chapter of that book is all about gender and is a summary of his earlier book about gender. But he comes out with this whole idea of sexuality being malleable in very similar ways. It's really some like, mad scientist, Nazi
Yeah, but he wasn't. Well, I don't know. I've heard some people say that those guys, Kinsey and him, were actually explicitly Marxist. They wanted to revolutionize or use that, but it seems like those ideas are separate than the queer theory.
I don't think. No, they are. They are. No, they are. I don't think that those guys were explicitly Marxist. I think that they were of a different vein of crackpot. Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps. Okay. Yeah.
And I might be wrong about that. I haven't studied their biographies in depth.
So you're continuing with queer research. Can we look forward to Pride Month being like you dominating Pride Month with your findings?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have any big fun plans for Pride Month. I have a lot of travel in Pride Month, so I'm really busy. I don't think that there's going to be much to Pride Month this year, honestly. But we'll see what happens.
It kind of dipped down last year.
Yeah, the energy's not so good. Not so good. Not
the whole coincidence of Trans Day of Visibility happening on Easter was kind of a flub, it seemed like. But
last year they had Trans Day of Visibility coincidentally happening when somebody shot a bunch of people. Very visible trans. Yeah. Not trans violence is violence. That's what's going on. They say trans women are women. That's not true. But trans violence is still violence.
Okay, that's your claim, not their claim.
Yeah, that's my claim.
Because it could be the case that trans violence is just...
but like I mentioned earlier, I'm, in theory, still working on this political warfare book. I'm still working on mapping out and explaining the evolution of communism. I'll probably do a workshop on that sometime this summer. And then I'm still committed to finishing at some point this book whenever I have time and motivation coinciding, finishing this book on American Maoism that I've been working on, that I've written a lot of, and it's pretty good. So those are the big projects I got going on right now. I mean, I got that documentary coming up too, of course, at the end of the month.
What's it called?
Beneath Sheep's Clothing.
Beneath Sheep's Clothing. I interviewed the producer director a few weeks ago.
Great. Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah. Beneath Sheep's Clothing, that movie, that's coming out.
Yeah.
Coming up soon.
You're a busy boy, James Lindsay.
I've got the new not quite final cut to review, so I need to do that probably today or tomorrow so I can see how awesome it is.
Do you have any dating advice?
Yeah, I mean, in general, that's a hard question, but generally it would be you should aim to do that rather than not.
So you're a believer in dating, not in preordained kind of love matches.
Yeah, I do like the idea that people picking their own partners and getting out there and finding them, testing out what fits and what doesn't, learning to interact with members of the opposite sex in a romantic situation. I'm kind of a fan of those protocols. Dating advice, I'll tell you the generic dating advice I give young men all the time that I wish young men understood. Which isn't exactly dating advice. It's more life advice that's related to the general topic, which is that it is always beneath your dignity as a man to pay for sexual activity. As in the direct sense. Like if taking somebody out to dinner is different, but buying a prostitute, signing up for somebody's OnlyFans and giving them money, etc., that's all below your dignity. Don't do it. Don't buy nudes. Buying nudes online, really? Really? It's beneath your dignity.
That brings up some advice from James Adams to you. James, save the short shorts for when you get around to starting that OnlyFans account. You can read Marx's papers on camera shirtless in short shorts. Reminds me of a meme I made of you many years ago.
That's a compelling idea. So since people may not know why in the world that's happening, I told a story recently on a podcast. And it went viral where it got clipped. The Myth-Informed guys. I was on Chrissy Mayer's podcast, and I told the story about how OnlyFans tried to recruit me one time. And the Myth-Informed guys clipped it and it put out and went viral. So what happened was I was at a super, super, super religious conference, like hardcore at the end of 2020. And they DM'd me. It's this lady, Louisa from OnlyFans, DMs me and was like, we're recruiting influencers for OnlyFans and we would like you to be one. And I thought this looks like a fun conversation to have. So I accepted the DM request and I was like, what's that about? And so she starts telling me, oh, you can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. It's like total free speech, blah, blah, blah. That was kind of the angle. We'll give you this. The normal cut is this. Here's your better cut as an influencer. If you're interested, percentage of the take, you can charge whatever you want, whatever. And I said, well, do you know what I do? And she was like, well, kinda. And I'm like, you don't. But anyway, I read basically philosophy papers into a microphone as a podcast. And sometimes those are videoed, but usually they're not even videoed. And she was like, well, that sounds good. You could do that. And I was like, well, like it's OnlyFans, right? So like, should I read philosophy papers in my underwear? And she got so excited. She was like, you could.
Yeah.
She was so excited. And so the joke has been that I'm going to read philosophy papers in my underwear.
You keep
On
on showing up
OnlyFans.
to these podcasts with your shirt on,
I have to
James.
make-
So I think you have too much modesty. You're still
I never
in that
said anything about
Western
shirts. I said underwear.
Protestant kind of. I know, but
No,
you're.
I almost, like I told you, I was sitting
I've
out in
never
the
seen.
sun. I was sitting out in the sun right before. I know you don't have that out there in the Pacific Northwest.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah, the mountain is not out. And so I was outside in the sun. 5 minutes before this started, I finally put the shirt on. And so you just barely missed it.
You're just itching to take it back off, though.
I'm really not.
So
Well, I
if
don't know.
it's-
Maybe I'll go outside when this is done, so I will
Is
probably
it-
take it off.
It's beneath your
shorts.
dignity to buy nudes. Is it beneath your dignity to sell nudes too, James?
I don't know, but it's not beneath my dignity to sell myself reading philosophy in my underwear.
So there is a OnlyFans in the works. Boxer briefs and
As in the immortal words of George
Marcus.
Costanza, what do you want to hear?
I don't know. I think we're waiting on the super chats for that, but
Yeah, well, I have a gay army as it is. I would have a real motivated gay army if I start.
they're
that.
not fake. They're real. They're the real gay.
Oh, I'm big with the gay.
Lindsay's.
Oh, yeah.
No, they're
yeah,
gays.
super.
Gays are great. Gays are great. I mean, there's
It's
gay
gays
and
against
there's gay.
groomers, gays for James Lindsay. It's just basically the same
It's
thing.
for James.
Gays for James, yeah.
Oh, is there merch for that? I don't want to see it. Are there tattoos? Do people tattoo you?
I haven't seen a tattoo yet, but I'm
Okay.
sure that's coming at some point.
They're probably going to come. So people can find you at New Discourses on Twitter at Conceptual James. Your dating advice is don't sell or don't buy nudes.
Yeah, don't
selling
buy
them
nudes.
is
Kill the market.
yeah,
No,
kill
I mean you should look for people in person. That's actually better dating advice. Get the fuck off the apps. Go to church. Go find somebody in real life who's trying to do something with their lives, trying to grow and be a better person that you're already expressing some kind of common community or common interest with, and try the old-fashioned way because the apps are super dissatisfying. The apps are super fake. Everything online is slightly fake, gay, and retarded. So just don't do it that way. Go meet people in person. I met my wife at a stoplight in traffic. If it can happen to me, it can happen to you. That's my
Such
sales.
a cute story. Well, I met my wife on my podcast, so your mileage may vary with the digital medium.
I didn't say digital medium. You didn't meet her on no damn Tinder.
No damn Tinder. No, I refuse to do that.
what
James
I'm
Lindsay,
saying.
let's wrap up this wonderful 52nd hour, 53rd hour of continuous based bromancing. Thank you very much for your afternoon, and thank you, audience, for tuning in.
Yeah.
Yeah.